Okay, gentlemen, let's start. It is 13:03, and we are into an FY24 adopted work session for May 11th. We will see if this will be our final work session.
I don't like the sound of that.
Huh?
I don't like the sound of
Well,
that.
I'm hopeful. And
I've heard hope is not a cause.
Thank you, I was just
it
going
is
to make
not-
that point.
So
Sorry, I had to.
hope is not a course of action. But I am hoping because I don't have all the information in front of me, and it's just where we're at. So no, but hope is definitely not a course of action. A lot of work has been done to this date amongst all of us as colleagues. Really appreciate the community coming out on Tuesday evening, spending about an hour with us, sharing with us, and the county and the community their thoughts and ideas on how the budget is being deliberated and how it's being, developed. I always appreciate when people have the willingness to speak up and let us know what's on their mind. So that was very, very positive. It may not go all their way, but that's part of, our role and responsibilities as well, is to take in all that information and make the best decision we can with the information we have. That's the course of action we're going to be taking. So with that, I know, Deb, you handed us out a couple of pieces of paper, actions that were taken, I guess, and then what's the other?
Oh, no,
piece?
these are not actions now. That's all behind us.
Okay. Oh, this is from the public hearing comments. Got it. Okay. Okay.
First, want to announce that today is Jake's first day as a budget analyst, moving up from.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Okay, so yes, you have a little summary of comments that were made. Of course, sometimes people say more than one thing, but this captures, I think, the primary points that were made. As always, things keep changing as we're trying to do this. There's two changes from the proposed budget. They're not really for you to make decisions unless you say, no, we're not doing that. But there's increased state funding for a couple school projects. We had to recognize that. And we did talk with the school system about a couple of relocatables, changes that they need to make, and the funding we had in place was not sufficient for doing that. We made that adjustment. And you see the current state of our op plan right below that. And then the second page is just a little bit more detail on what I just said about school projects.
Okay. Okay, from the discussions from Tuesday evening, and as much as we've thought through over the last couple weeks and few weeks and months in developing, what are some thoughts and ideas that you want to bring forward at this point? Anybody?
Yes, I would like to revisit a possible 1% bonus using one-time money to make up for where we cut the raises from, and it was 5.55, I think,
Right,
to
to
4.55. And I know bonuses aren't the same as raises, but we don't have any more ongoing money. And I just feel like we owe it to the county employees, and that includes, the cut we made included commissioner employees, state's attorney, circuit court,
Yes.
and so I would like to see it for that same group, a 1% bonus with one-time money. And I think there's almost enough left in '22 for that, or not quite?
Very close.
Very close, okay. So I was going to say, it appears we have more than we thought we might in '23, but we shouldn't have to touch that.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I'd like to second that, if that's the motion you'd like to put
Yeah.
on the table. I'd like to second it and just follow up with a little bit more discussion on it is, the argument of bonuses, against using bonuses is extremely valid, because it doesn't, it puts a Band-Aid on some concerns you may have, as opposed to a continuing solution that we're trying to establish. But in this case, I believe that Band-Aid bridging us to next fiscal year is warranted. And just knowing that there's positions that are continuing to be open, and it's just becoming more challenging. I mean, there's decisions that we're gonna have to make, keeping our workforce healthy. Not just morale, but just healthy and retaining them. And I think that's what this bonus of 1% is a gesture to do in that direction. So that's my 2 cents on it. So I have a motion, I have a second. Now, beyond my discussion, any other question, discussion on this?
And the only question, to make sure I'm correct, because we're using one-time money to do this, it doesn't affect the bottom line of the operating budget. It will not change that.
Right, because your proposal is to take money from what was left in FY '22, which is one-time money. This is a one-time expenditure. The two are not exactly the same number, but they're close.
How much is left from FY '22? I thought, if I remember correctly, 1% increase was $568,000.
Yeah, and this is a little bit less because we don't have to account for pension because it's a bonus and not a salary. I don't know, do you have the numbers on there?
Yeah.
Susan?
The cost will be $423,000,
Oh, even less than that.
and the one-time surplus remaining is $520.7, so a little bit less than $3,000
Okay.
difference between the two.
527 in FY '22. 527 left over in FY '22.
520,700. Yeah, it's right
okay,
here.
got it. Okay,
526.51, to be exact.
thanks.
Yeah, and I forgot also when I made the motion, because it's a bonus, not a raise, that other money comes out of it.
Right.
Deb was on it.
And what was the cost of the 1%?
She's a-
523,400.
Thank you.
Okay. I apologize, Mike, were you cut
Yeah.
mid-sentence?
No, actually you didn't, but, I mean, I'll just say it, I mean, we're raising fees, we're raising taxes, we've reduced the budget for ag pres.
We
We're
didn't
spending-
reduce the budget for ag repairs for this
Well,
year
No, we-
in the out years, it looks as
we did.
though,
We
on
did,
paper.
and we are using one-time money to
Correct.
bridge it, so, yeah, you're right.
we found a way to spend $25 more million, and we're here on May 11th trying to find a way to spend more money. I just disagree. I think we should be trying to find ways to cut money and not tax people. And it seems like we're going in the opposite direction, so I really wish we'd maybe have a little further discussion about this.
And I understand.
Absolutely. Any other discussion?
I guess my concern is that echoing kind of what Commissioner Guerin had said, we really did struggle to get to a place where we had balanced things, and we've been attempting to justify the increase in the recordation tax commensurate with the cuts and the reassignment of certain funds that we've made through the course of the budgeting process. And while I understand and respect the argument that, we want to try to attract and retain quality employees, where do we end up next year? This is a one-time bonus. It gets us through this year, but we end up next year, and do we end up in the same situation where we have to try to plug everything with a bonus all over again in order to meet what we did this year?
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think it's a fair comment by Commissioner Vigliotti. I mean, we're looking at what, 520,000 after, that's the remaining of 20, is that 23?
22.
22. Just out of curiosity, what do we have? So what's 23 is what? Is that 24,100,000 I'm looking at there?
Actually, this morning, we had said it's close, it's now 33.1. You
Okay.
said 37, but.
So we have the 33 and we have 520 on top of that, roughly. Got a kind of comment to both Vigliotti and Commissioner Guerin. Yes, we haven't technically cut AgPres this year, but tell that to all the people that I got phone calls from, that most of them aren't even in my district, that support AgPres, because their concern is this will be the lowest we've ever had it going into the next year. If we've got $30-some million, I'd prefer to see $1.5 million put back for next year, even though it's not in this year's budget. I think we need to put our money where our mouth is, for lack of a nicer way of putting it, because if we actually support AgPres and we believe we support AgPres, we should show we support AgPres, and I would suggest we take $1.5 million and put it in to next year now versus
Take
leaving.
one-time money and adjust
I would like to see it
next year.
concurrently going the next several years, because, we brought down the AgPres staff. Joe had asked them to come down. We had a nice long conversation. Joe had made the point, if we overfund you or extend funding, can we accomplish more faster? We then immediately turned around from that, and we cut them. And yes, we moved things from pocket to pocket, and I get that, but what was the point of having a conversation to see if we can get to the goal sooner, if that's our true goal, if we're going to leave the out year now at such a low limited number? I really just question the movement of that whole process with that. But then I also, to Commissioner Guerin's point, we came in one day, we were at zero. Magically went from zero to several $1 million that we had to find money for. And now we've gotten back to zero in theory, but where this morning we're told about how recordation now is looking to be a little less than what was expected. I remember Ted mentioned that in open. And I have some other comments, but if you want to go through this motion first, I'll continue after. But I do think we really need to take a harder look at this budget than just finish it today or, Tuesday or whatever day we think is the cleanest and easiest way to do it, because we all know it's not easy. We all know Blueprint is coming. We all have varying opinions of how strict and how difficult that may be. But I think we need to not be sitting here today making the assumption we're going to be done today. We shouldn't even make the assumption we're going to be done Tuesday or Thursday or whatever day. We should be willing. We've got the dates. We have the jobs. We were given the positions for a reason. I think we need to sit here and try to get this budget a little more correctly functional. I have real challenges that we're $25 million up over last budget. Not to say that some of those things aren't needed. I'm by no means diminishing the needs and requests of anybody, but I think if we're not careful, we're the tax and spend commissioners. And I didn't come in here to be a tax and spend commissioner, and I'm not looking for that. And I realize that if next year we get there and we have to fight Blueprint, and Blueprint says raise the money, and we're stuck in that position, to Ted's point this morning, of, hey, you either do it or they take it no matter what, okay, then we do it, but then it's across the board. I don't want to be doing this in this fashion where it's going in with a scalpel trying to play with things today.
Yeah, two things. First, on AgPres funding, this definitely will not be the lowest AgPres funding has ever been.
Yeah.
We've been much lower than where we are now. And the other, I just want to remind, we do have to adopt by the last day of May.
Right.
And there has to be some time between final decisions and us being able to put together the ordinance that you have to
Right.
adopt.
No,
Okay.
I'm aware of that. I mean, that's why we had 3 more proposed. Today was made in a session, so we technically still have on calendar, unless I'm mistaken, and I have the wrong calendar, 3 additional dates plus this work session, so we have 4.
And if appropriate,
We don't have 3 more
well,
sessions.
Two.
we-
You have-
yeah, but.
There were 2
but the
additional
fact-
previously.
The
But-
original dates were the 16th and 18th.
Okay,
Okay.
but the fact
So we
is.
added today, and then adoption was
Right.
supposed to be the following,
But-
23rd or
but-
25th.
But the fact is, just what, Commissioner Gordon, you're saying, and I 100% agree, this is our job, this is our responsibility, and if it needs to be every day of the week to do, we're going to do it, and we'll carve out the time necessary. We have a model of using Tuesdays and Thursdays, but, that model can always be moved into a place that we can convene appropriately and do the work. So, yeah, I agree with you. We're going to do this to the task that's in front of us, not to the time. So I do agree with that. The AgPres piece, it is difficult putting our money where our mouth is. We are using, I believe, one-time funds we've allocated for AgPres for this FY '24.
yes.
What's that?
In '24.
In '24, right. So again, it's that Band-Aid approach, because we don't have, we didn't have the consensus of putting together ongoing money for AgPres. So we used one-time funds to put in place to carry it over to '24. And I apologize, I mean, we're not, we try to stick to Robert's rules and, do everything we can in that fashion, and we didn't quite do that by even bringing this back up onto the table, because the two of us are bringing this up, and the two of us are the two that brought it up last, so I apologize to my colleagues.
Maybe
but
I don't understand Robert's rules or what. I thought we were here to finish the budget.
It is, but Robert's rules is simply put, if you put a motion in place and it gets turned down, you do not have the ability to put that motion back into play.
Oh,
That's Robert's
you're
rules.
saying I made the motion
Right.
before.
So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
a parliamentary.
Yeah,
That
okay.
was my concern. I think, I do want to address Commissioner Kyler's motion. It's still on the table.
Yep.
And then after that, I was going to ask Deborah, Ted, if you could just very quickly, for people who are watching, run through the AgPres situation again, so people understand what we did. But I
Yeah.
want to be thoughtful.
Yeah,
You do have the motion.
And I was, you said you'd second it. I didn't say I was making a motion.
Oh, okay,
but-
okay,
but
no problem.
I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
And I want to
Me
talk
too.
about recordation too, and AgPres is fine with me. I agree.
Okay,
It's not the lowest it's ever been. Whoever said that doesn't know history, but it's the same as it's been lately. And I thought,
okay.
I've heard from 2 or 3 people that we cut AgPres and we didn't, but that's okay. I've heard a lot of other comments
So-
too.
so
you
what-
know.
what-
But I'll withdraw my motion.
No,
If
no, I apologize. Walking away
No, no.
walking away from motions. Do we want to address this 1% at
That-
this time, or is this something?
It
let's
sounds to
put
me
off
like
the side?
3 are
Right.
opposed to it,
So let's move
so
on
I'll
from
just
that.
withdraw my motion.
So what else wants to be brought up at this time? Is it AgPres?
We can start with that
Okay.
one. I've got
Yeah.
another one. We can start with
Okay.
AgPres.
Okay,
I mean, obviously, we've got it at $1.5 million, which next year would only be, what, the million as it currently stands, correct?
You reduced $1 million from every year and then added back one time 1.5 into '24.
Yes. What would it be if we added that back as an ongoing?
Debbie, can you zoom in, or no? I apologize if you can, keeping the integrity of it. Okay, thanks.
Is that better?
Yeah, it is, thank you.
So, and this one's pretty straightforward. Every year on the bottom line will be $1 million worse.
Yeah, do you want to go back to the operating balance to look at that?
Yeah, if you could, real quick. Go ahead.
So do you want to add ongoing money for this year's budget or just the next?
No, I'd like
one?
to see it just extended for next year. I
You
think,
wanted to see it
I
for-
think that, to your point and mine, with the various group of people we've probably both spoken to in some cases, I think it puts a little more ease to that community, which, we support it, so we should support it, and I would rather put that at ease than somebody sitting there going, well, I hope they put it in July, when they plan to start the budget for next year.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
So
Second.
Is that ongoing money you want to do? Is that what you're saying? And take away that one-time money?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So have we historically used all of the AgPres money each year?
Yes. Timing might not always be perfect, but it does get used.
But we pretty much use it.
Yes.
Okay.
So remove the one time for this year, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yes.
and putting ongoing money.
I have
So,
no,
to me, I don't even want to look at the bottom line yet until we hear more ideas
I'm
on either
confused.
cuts or
So I think Commissioner Gordon wants to remove the 1.5 one-time funding that we put into
Right.
this year, and he wants to restore the 1 million ongoing to this year and all subsequent years.
Well, not for this year, but we already have it in for this year. So I'm saying subsequent years. I'd like
Yeah.
to see that, not adding to this year.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying, is leave this year as
Correct.
is.
We'll leave it as is, but I'd like to,
So-
yes.
Okay, because then I was confused about what you were, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you're saying this year, keeping the one time? And
Yes.
then the following years going?
going back, reverting back.
And that's the motion?
That's a
All right,
motion.
and then it's a second.
The challenge is whether we do it this year or in the next 5 years, we're just adding into an unbalanced budget.
That would just be,
Or adding, additionally into an unbalanced budget. So that's what we're talking about, whether we build something or provide a service in 2026, that's still affecting our budget. So whether we do it this year or then.
Morse code.
Yeah, no kidding.
so let me make sure I have this right. It would be keep the 1.5 one-time in there, and then
Start 1 million
In-
ongoing in
in
25.
25. Okay,
Correct,
well, that is
correct.
what's reflected right
Right.
now
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
in this one.
I'm not going to use the right terminology. I'm going to call it a budget deficit, but maybe that's not the right term. But in FY '26, is there a short answer as to why that's so low? And not that it's low, but that it's way lower than the other out years.
I'd have to look into the details, but remember, revenue changes aren't straight lines. Like I think property tax, how much we're anticipating each district to go up is different, so it changes. With recordation, we were backing off of where we had been. That changes a little bit over time. Sometimes there are one-time expenditures in certain years that aren't in other years. So there are reasons. I don't remember them all, though.
Yeah, there is something in particular that's
Could
happening.
could it be hiring, fire EMS hires, or no?
Really, what it is we swapped out some cash for reducing bonds.
Yes.
Okay.
We did that
Yeah.
in '24 and '25. That's why you're seeing a bigger negative in '25. If we didn't do that, we'd have a surplus on the bottom, but in the out years, our expenses would have been higher because of debt service. So, and you see the deficit getting larger as you go up because of the transition, the full transition of the fire coming in.
And just on terminology for anybody listening out there, I would differentiate between a deficit and a projected debt fall, a shortfall. A deficit, I believe, suggests that you've spent money you don't have. What we're doing is saying if we project this out, it doesn't work. But when we get there, it will have to.
The,
Thank you.
a lot of comments were made on recordation from Tuesday evening. Does anybody have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions regarding recordation? That's one of the big
I wanted
elephants.
to bring up with that we looked at more money, more surplus from this year than we expected. I'd love to see us not do recordation taxes if there's some other source of revenue that covers. What What did that end up being? 3 million, 3.5 million?
3.9.
3.9. And again, I don't want to just say, let's cut it and figure out this year, because then next year would be twice as bad. And I understand their passion. I think we need more inventory in Carroll County. We need to reduce density in Carroll County, which nobody wants that in their neighborhood. Well, I shouldn't say that. In the Westminster area, most kids want that. I can't speak for the rest of the county. I know my kids would prefer their house was about 2/3 of their lot. But a lot of that would do more for people coming to Carroll County. Now, what I was told the other night is when builders in development sell lots, the buyer picks up the whole recordation. I don't know if that's correct or not. But it adds, if you split it like traditionally, it adds about 0.12% to the price of a house. I don't think that's driving anybody to another state. But it is an increase in a fee or tax, which I don't like. So I wanted to bring that up and say, you know, how do we look at, is there any way to make up that 3.9? And I don't think, it's like when we talk ag press, or when I talked the bonus, that was one-time money, but none of us have talked about what can we take out of the budget, you know, and you know, is if we could find half of the 3.9 in revenue, is there something that in expenditures we could cut? And I'm not sure. I do feel, I don't like raising a tax, any kind of tax. I thought recordation is one of the softest ones. The only people who pay that is if you're buying a house or selling a house. And on a $400,000 house, it would go up about $500. I'm not sure that's that critical, but it is raising a tax. And I wanted to bring it up that if there's any way we could avoid it, I'd love to see it. If we can't, I still think it's the best way to get the budget balanced.
The idea of, can we make it up in another revenue? In a conceptual way, yes, we can, because there's very little of our revenue that we know exactly what it's going to be. So I can't sit here and say, nope, can't be done. Having said that, though, I believe we've given you the projections that we believe, I don't even want to say this, I was going to say that we're comfortable with, but you know I'm not actually comfortable with income tax. If we up another revenue, we might actually find ourselves having to rethink income tax and maybe just have made a problem even worse. So if the board tells me, figure out a way to change revenues by $2 million, we'll do something. You say change it by $20 million, that's probably where I have to say, sorry, I can't do that. You'll have to figure that out yourself. But I can't recommend doing it.
Well, to Commissioner Kyler's point, I don't disagree with the majority of what you just said. I think we're pretty aligned in that. Obviously, we all know economically the inventories are massively down. Home prices are up, inflation's up, interest rates are up. You know, Commissioner Vigliotti mentioned it multiple times in the past few weeks, people using their tax refunds to buy groceries. We had a former county commissioner that sat here one year and talked about how his daughter couldn't afford to buy a home in Carroll County because they were too expensive and she had to go over the state line. And that was before inflation, before all these other issues. I had a conversation with someone recently, and some of the same people, we all sit in here, and I'm not saying we aren't trying to help, but our fire, EMS, law enforcement, and teachers. I know of a member of law enforcement right now that can't afford to buy a house in Carroll County. They're going over the state line. Now, does recordation maybe completely change that? Maybe to some people, no. Maybe to some people, yes. I mean, if you're buying a home and selling a home in Carroll County, whether you're splitting or not, you're doing it twice. So, to me, the challenge becomes, we were at 0 the day before we threw recordation, and we were 0, we ended up negative, then we were back to 0. I'm not really philosophically in a position of where I want to support a tax on a specific group of people. I know none of us like taxes, none of us like fees. It's part of what it takes to get things accomplished sometimes. But I think the unfortunate thing is, I don't want to target one group of people. I don't want to hurt that teacher or that that firefighter, that EMS driver, or that person in law enforcement. And I've actually spoken to several that are moving out of the state because of that. Is that just because of recordation? Not necessarily. Part of it's the fact that, to your point, there's no inventory. Philosophically, I can't support this at this point. After doing a lot of other research and looking at things not just about recordation, we've got major corporations laying off 20% of their workforce. I don't want to see Carroll County become a place where it becomes a total bedroom community. To your point, if we want to keep young people living here, we need to make it thrive in a variety of areas. Part of it is inventory, part of it is quality of life. But for me, I'm not going to be able to support this at this point.
Support what?
And
Recordation.
I'd like to, and I don't know what commissioner said his daughter couldn't move here. I struggle with those comments. All three of my kids have houses better than I had at their age. They did it by renting, maybe buying a condo, maybe buying a duplex, working hard and moving up. Part of the problem with the younger generation today, I'm sure I'm going to get emails, they want the house that my kids have as their third house to start. Well, my first one, I could only buy it because I rented out the first floor. So again, I didn't have much money and I stayed in Carroll County. I think it's a choice. It's a choice you have to make. And I'll be honest, and I told him, you've got a lot of other variables in a house. Through the inspection process, you can have things pop up that cost $1,000 or $2,000. If $500 makes or breaks somebody buying a house, they probably shouldn't be looking. And it's still a tax. I still wanted to bring it up, and I'd still like this to get out of it, but I don't. It's like you said, people are using their tax returns to buy
Buy
groceries,
food.
and I feel for that. If they're using a $500 savings on buying a house to buy groceries, I'll just stop there. Hopefully, they're not doing that. But it's tough, and I understand the message we're receiving from real estate people. I don't agree with the message, but I do agree we're raising a tax my first year in office, and I don't like that.
Right, I don't think any of us like that whatsoever. And as I mentioned in previous sessions, it really does sicken me to have to consider any kind of a tax increase whatsoever. I know that everybody here feels the same way. But so we say for the sake of argument, okay, well, we do not raise the recordation tax this year. That puts us $3.9 million further negative. And, we talk about, well, we need to find ways to cut or to find more revenue, but we have to have something more concrete than just saying, we need to find it, we need to find it, we need to find it. We actually have to have something tangible that we can use to accommodate the rejection of raising a recordation tax. And so we end up 3.9 million negative this year, at least at this moment before the balanced budget. Where does that put us next year? Do we have to invoke taxes that are even steeper in the coming years in order to compensate for what we don't do this year? I guess that's the challenge that I'm coming up with. And so, listening to the potentiality for this, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are the projects that we assign surplus funding to in the present in fiscal year 24? Do we take some of that to plug the gap for this year? Well, we could get away this year without raising the recordation tax, but again, that doubles the difficulties that we're going to be facing this summer when we go into FY25. we really are in a difficult situation where, the trajectory of the course of the county, a lot of things, between Blueprint Fire Department of Fire and Emergency Service, there's a lot that has to be taken into account. And so I guess the question that we face is, okay, well, if we are going to try to not raise the recordation tax for fiscal year '24, where does the money come from to plug that gap, that $3.9 million? And again, my thought is that if that's the case, and if we're going to do that, we would have to use one-time funding to do that, which means we have to rearrange part of the budget with respect to the one-time funding. But again, that takes us from $3 million negative in FY24 to -7, really. I mean, I philosophically, ideologically, I do not like the idea of a recordation tax increase, but, we're, between, needing to adequately pay sheriff's deputies, corrections officers, the school board, Blueprint coming down the road, Department of Fire and Emergency Services, paying for, quality employees for the county, the state's attorney, the courts, the libraries at this point. The libraries were impacted by the minimum wage increase. Again, it really does make me sick to be talking about any kind of a tax increase, but short of that, and short of plugging in funding for this year, for fiscal year '24, where do we go next year? I mean, I guess that's not a rhetorical question. I mean, that's a hard, substantive question. How do we take the step from this year to next year?
So taking away philosophical, ideological, other ways of thinking through it, think through this pragmatically. I mean, and that's what we have to do.
Right.
Whether we like it or not, we have to think through this pragmatically. And there is a significant unknown for the upcoming years with the Blueprint. The environment has changed. Early on, a few years back, we were in a very good position knowing we did not have to spend for the Kirwan Commission because of where we were, but the environment changed. It wasn't our doing, it was the state mandates and the challenge of meeting those demands. That environment has changed. So pragmatically, how are we going to be in the best position? Do we go in a glide path of increasing revenue over the next few years or a handful of years? Do we don't go into that glide path and attack it when it hits us, in front of us and have to react to it? So one is, being, I believe, more proactive into a glide path forward as opposed to being pushed into a reactive situation. I really would like to say to some of these demands, that the state's putting on us, especially with the Blueprint, that no, we will not do the things you're telling us to do because you are restraining the money that's potentially being given to us in the compensatory education. That's where the legislation needs to come in and say, let's open up those parameters to allow us to use those funds. But right now, that ain't happening. So they are limiting the way we're able to use the dollars. That's a significant, concern. And unless that changes, we are going to be in a world of hurt in the out years. Where it's going to be a serious cliff, that we're going to either have to climb up very dramatically with revenue or jump off the other side and say, okay, what services will definitely not be done anymore in this county? Because years ago, when the county took away 100 positions and the schools took away 300 some odd positions, all the services remain the same. And I think we're kind of at wit's end at this point. And what services will we not do, and what are we going to hold ourselves accountable for saying we're just not going to do this? We did it with the coupons, with the landfill. That saved us a couple $100,000, I think. Some people were upset about that. But the culture changed, and they accepted the fact that they didn't get 2 coupons, when they received their property tax. But there will be services that need to change if we are looking at not bringing in additional revenue. The recordation, to me, is an approach to create a glide path. And if we don't need any additional, then that's fine, we're done. But if we do, we have a path forward on what to do. The people I heard from most, like I think all of us, I mean, there's outliers, but mostly was from the Realtor, community. Like you said, the inventory is not large. That's out there. But I don't like the tax situation. They haven't been touched in quite some time, and we've lived through it. And there's this culture amongst us that we live within our means, and those taxes haven't changed. Everything else is growing around us. And we're not going to be able to do the things that people want us to do and have the expectations. We have a great road system. I wouldn't want to go to Pennsylvania on their roads. I mean, truly, the services we provide on our roads and our infrastructure is phenomenal because of what we're doing with our workforce and what we're prioritizing. I don't like the recordation situation, but I think we have to look at what revenue pragmatically are we willing to put in place to either maintain, sustain, or keep the services that are expected in the county. I don't know, we could shut down parks, we could shut down lots of things, and they just go away. I don't think that's what people want.
And I should probably say too, I'm not trying to be argumentative or anything, but if somebody does have a potential path forward with not introducing recordation tax, I'm open to hearing it. Again, we've done a lot of things over the course of the budgeting process, taking money away from certain planned projects, shuffling certain funds around, initially taking away some money from AgPres, cutting the projected salary increases for employees. We really spent a lot of time trying to get things to where they needed to be, and the recordation tax was a last-ditch effort to attempt to plug the budget to even out the budget. So if, again, I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to ideas about where that additional 3.9 comes from. Again, the only place that I can conceivably think of at this moment would be the one-time funding that we put into certain projects toward the beginning of our sessions.
Well, I guess the question I have to at least put out there and have us all pose for a second on is this. We're not maintaining when we're spending an additional $25 million. Yes, we're increasing salaries, and so forth, which that is in a sense sort of maintaining. We're trying to keep the quality of employees, and I understand that, but we're adding in a lot of things. And I'm not saying I'm for those things. I'm not saying I'm against those things, but we're not really maintaining. Maintaining would be we're barely spending anything above and beyond. I mean, obviously, we all agreed, and I was one of the big proponents early on. I said, let's stick the school board in early. Let's see how it really looks, because I felt, at least personally, and I don't know about the rest of you, in some budgets, I felt like they were sort of done midway, and it was not really, I hate to use the word fair, but I'm going to use it, but it wasn't really ideal for them when they were trying to plan a budget that they were going to pass within their own process. And I thought that by putting them in early, we at least knew if it was going to be tough, we knew how tough it might be if we were going that route. So, I mean, I agree with your point of it being, where do we find 3.9 million? I'm not sure, and Ted can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if I'd call it a cut at this point, because this is all proposed. We haven't enacted anything. If we were to cut, say, salaries from last year, not that I'm saying we are, that would be a cut. I think we're just currently looking at moving and maneuvering funds around. Just to make a point, I don't think it's really cutting. January 19th, we all unanimously agreed to strengthen the supermajority resolution in Carroll County, and I know we all believe in that. I think the question is, somebody said it the other night, and I kind of found it a little humorous and a little intriguing, their choice of words, but somebody mentioned the other night, Tuesday, that they have 4 rookie new commissioners. Okay, call us rookies, but we all have past experiences. You know, Joe, you have yours, Mike has his, I'm in business, Kenny's been in construction and business as well. I don't really think there's 4 rookies. I think there's 4 people that just bring different things to the table, just as Commissioner Rothstein does. I think, to me, and this might not work for everybody, but we have a proposed budget that we need to finish. And Joe, you were the one that came up with the idea and said, let's hit the ground running. Let's not wait till whenever next year. So what I'd like to propose, without making an actual motion, let's get this one done, but let's look at things a little deeper than we've ever looked at them. And that's not anything against, you know, former commissioners, staff, anyone. Let's really dig deep. I mean, you know, not making this about this, but we had a building that went from $1.5 million to over $7 million the other year. Not criticizing, but that's $7 million that might have solved some of the problems we are looking at today. And I'm not going back in time and trying to play fix it.
What building, just curious?
Charles Carroll. It's a $1.5 million pole barn that magically somehow kept getting more expensive, and that's not a criticism to anybody involved. It's just the facts that that building got very expensive in a very small populated community, and I think that definitely didn't help us any. That's just my opinion. But I think we need to get this budget done, and I think, Joe, to your point, let's dig real deep. Let's not just look at what's the recommended budget. Let's look 6 levels down. Let's really look. Because, you know, we've all said it, Commissioner Rothstein said it, one of the greatest things about the people in this community is we get together and we figure out how to get things done. So let's get through this budget and let's get it done, and let's do next year completely different. Just my thoughts.
How would you do, wait, well, hold on. So, because I want to make sure I'm clear, I'm ready to go as deep as you want to go, and we can stay here as long as you want to go in depth, as far as you want. 6 levels, 10, it doesn't matter. That one, then number 2 is, what do you want to do and think through different next year? Because I agree, it ain't about rookies or anything like that. I was taken back and not appreciative of those type of comments. But if there are ways to do things, get them out there.
Absolutely.
Say them now.
Well, and I've brought some of it up in the previous work sessions. I mean, you know, we didn't know that we had $400,000 in membership fees we pay to things. I'm not saying those should or shouldn't be paid. Let's deep dive the budget. And I appreciate all the hard work that staff puts into it, but I don't know where some of these departments, how these dig down. I don't know any more than the number I'm looking at. And that's not a criticism, that's just a presentation, and it's nothing against anybody else. But to Joe's point, if we really want to start making real headway and trying to make change, whether you want to do it this year, or we want to get through this year and then start immediately right after, whatever you all want to do. But I think we've got to look at this vastly different than we've looked at it before. That's just my opinion.
And I agree, and 2 things. One, somebody sent me yesterday's Baltimore paper to your comment on thinking somebody's going to develop common sense. The AIB committee and MSDE can't even agree on reviewing the county's programs for this year.
Right.
To tell them if they've done it right, much less tell them what they ought to do next year.
Right.
And so I almost wish somebody down there would say, between COVID and test scores and the fact that kids can't even pass civics anymore, why don't we delay this for a year or 2 and let our kids recover from being stuck at home looking at a computer? But I see no hope of that. So we're stuck with that, and I think like we discussed this morning, the state may not let us not fund it. Now, secondly, if we get rid of this 3.9, it's ongoing money, and yes, we can deep dive into the budget, but a vehicle, a building, any one-time money doesn't cover this on the bottom line. We sat here and added positions, that would reduce this. We sat here and gave increases in pay, although I think in most cases they were, I don't want to get into national politics and why we have the inflation we have. You know, it's, I think last year commissioners tried to do a good thing to help people step up, and then our economy went to hell and it wasn't really a step up. You know, it's tough, but if we want to get rid of this 3.9, we need to cut positions, cut pay. You know, it's, like you say, the school system, to replace any of their money with one-time money doesn't help them, because it's all salaries. You know, and I think that's the same for the sheriff, for EMS, for, unfortunately, all of them. So we've either got to tighten them up, and I think, you know, we heard the rhetorical things, I'm trying to substitute words, rhetorical things that you hear so much of cut everybody 5%. You know, that stuff, it sounds good, but it means nothing. So I think the only way we could get rid of this 3.9 at this point would be cut positions or pay to people. Which I agree, you know, we got 3 more days, let's look at it, but we all have different parts that we favor. We've got to all grit our teeth and cut some of them if we really want to get rid of this 3.9.
Well,
And that's why
so-
I thought you'd say, oh yeah, last week everything changed, we have another 5 million, you know, don't worry. But you didn't.
Now,
So, again, looking at that, to me, I understand the impact of culture and philosophy and idealism when it comes to taxes. And we've done an incredibly great job keeping our, you know, our path in that direction. But when the environment changes in such a way that, you know, it's going to be some blunt force trauma hitting us. And if we don't do something, and it's, you know, I've heard comments, well, don't do a little bit now and some later. Just wait, don't do anything now and then a lot later. And I'm like, oh man, that's crushing. I mean, we do that with fees, and we've done that with fees, and I lived through that, and it's just an ugly situation. You know, recordation tax is a tax. Whether we want to think it may be a fee because it only deals with people buying and selling homes, it's a tax. We could also go, but also to understand, we are in the bottom third, even with this increase of recordation fees that we put in place of the entire state. So it's not,
that's only true if you add transfer and recordation
right,
together.
but we have no transfer.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that somebody out there
right.
said that's not right.
No, that's true. Yeah, apples to apples, recordation, that's not true. But recordation plus transfer, which we do not have transfer, we are in the bottom third. And yeah, that gets miscommunicated sometimes on social media and other places when they try to do a comparison one-to-one. But it really is a recordation, it's that piece to recordation plus transfer. We don't have transfer. I'm just in a, you know, interesting place because what was in front of us a few years back was fire and EMS. That was like the big bear in front of us. And it wasn't a herd of elephants, it was just a handful of bears that we were dealing with.
Still a bear, though.
It is, and that's the problem. It's still a bear. And now, in addition to that, we have that elephants in the room. So we got bears and elephants, and they both have to be funded appropriately to get us where we need to go. And we are in a glide path of hiring and doing what's right in fire EMS. I don't want to take any shortcuts on that. We cannot afford to take shortcuts on our public school system, because I do believe they're trying their best to do everything they can, and that's why they came back to us for that additional funding. You know, nothing was frivolous that's been asked of us, and things that were not as high a priority to some were taken off the table pretty quickly. But those that we came to and said, yeah, these are not frivolous asks, you know, We've made clear direction towards them. But in order to establish that, we had to look at recordation. We had to look at revenue. And it was determined that recordation was the best avenue to look at. And that's pragmatic. You know, I don't like raising taxes. None of us here do. That's idealistic, but pragmatically, to govern this county for the services that they deserve with fire EMS, which really was the big bear and still is a big bear, in addition to schools, we gotta do something. And I don't wanna wait till next year because it'll be a steeper climb, and that's my biggest issue.
And we've got to look at our services. Back, the recordation taxes very much affect people buying homes. But people come to Carroll. The one we just dealt with, I won't say where they're from, but a different county. And I said, did you check out Hampstead Elementary? It's way better than where we're coming from. We're thrilled. You know, that's why people come here. The EMS, the fire, the
Right,
sheriff,
right.
the safety. So do we want to cut that to help people come here? You know, do we want to kill the product? And I don't know. And I just went through a bunch of pages of stuff we've added and deleted, and nothing hits me in the face of, oh, wow, you know, this, let's take this out. Let's undo this.
You know, that.
And even some
yeah.
of the positions we added, they might add up to $500,000. So now we only
Right.
need to find 3.4 more, you know?
But those positions, like with fire EMS, I mean, are critical.
Oh, we
to
sat here
getting
and
us
said
in
they
the
were
direction.
important.
But, you know, your point is taken, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but it may have been an accountant or accounting firm, and they're a little bit higher price. And people are gonna pay a higher price to get a better service sometimes. And we pride ourselves in safety, security, public schools, and quality of life here in Carroll County, maintaining an agricultural community. So that's why ag preservation is so important to us, with a very, not lofty goal, but pragmatic goal, and we're gonna get there. That's been there since 1980, and we're over 3/4 the way there. I mean, in order to maintain that,
God
the
bless you.
question is, what are we not doing? Or what are we doing that's, I use the word frivolous, there's probably a better word to use. I mean, sometimes it costs more to get to the place you want to get to. And, you know, that's kind of where we're at. I don't know.
And if we truly don't want more dense housing, and we truly don't want commercial buildings on commercially zoned ground, then the people here are gonna have to pay more taxes, because we either need to increase the amount of people being taxed or increase taxes, and, I don't, it's hard.
So, I know there's a lot of talk about FY '25 and blueprint. I'm able to just focus on now. We just don't know what's gonna happen next year, so that's my main focus. 3.9 million is less than 1% of this budget. So, in my mind, if we can't find less than 1% of this budget to cut, you might have way more to deal with next year when we have to figure out if we're gonna even add revenue or not. We gave some very generous raises on top of some very generous raises. We're giving the school board 96% of what they asked for, and they can't tell us what they need next year. And I know that's not their fault, but they don't know. So I don't know if we're gonna come to a consensus today on what the five of us individually are willing to do without cut. But cut's not even the right word, because it's just a decrease in the increase. I don't think anybody's getting cut anything. Nothing's getting cut. But I just don't know if we're going to come to a consensus today. We do have a little bit of time, and I emphasize a little bit of time, to come up with less than 1% of a $564 million budget. So we can say, we didn't raise taxes, which I think is important, because next year may be different, whether it's a recordation tax or whatever you want to call it. I just have a problem with that. We spent more money, 25 million more, and I was sitting here for those discussions as well, so I was a part of that. But we didn't vote on this budget yet, and I don't think any of us are really comfortable with it, but we do have some time. So I think that's the ask right now of the five of us, is to take these books home and figure out what we can come back with, perhaps on Tuesday. But, I mean, again, we just don't know what's going to happen next year. And, you know, if we're in a position as a Board of Education, a Board of County Commissioners, sitting here trying to justify ways to pay for something that we think is going to make our schools worse, then that's going to be something that each individual of us is going to have to kind of come to reasons with and figure out how we're going to approach that. I think there's probably some difference of opinion there. I think there's been some discussion about services as well. Not to play down the new guy card, but, relatively new. What's happened the last 4 years is hard to gauge when you're the new guy. But I think we're good on services right now. I think each of the districts are very diverse, but I don't consider it a major issue right now. I don't know if raising salaries, I guess that's a retention, but doesn't help you fill positions that are remaining vacant necessarily, not in this environment. So that's where I'm falling out right now on this entire budget discussion, is that we should be able to come up with 1% of a $564 million budget to cut and just deal with FY24, get ready to come back for FY25. I don't have all the answers right now, but we've got a little bit of time.
One specific comment and a general comment on the, not raising salaries won't help us fill. It's not going to help us with everything, but it does help us with some. The changes we made last year led to us filling some positions that we hadn't been able to fill. It hasn't solved all of our problems. I think, if we don't raise salaries, we have to expect that it is going to have an impact on our ability to fill at least some positions. Then on the idea of finding places to cut, if the board wants to say, how do we dig into this and find expenditures to cut, I would suggest, rather than you all going home and thinking about this individually, that we stay here and talk about possibilities while you've got all of us in the room. Because one by one, what's going to happen is you're going to say, oh, we could cut something here. And then we're going to say, no, you can't cut that. Or, yes, you can, but if you do, you need to consider this. And you just won't have all that available. I had a commissioner once who took on that effort once, and he came in with a balanced budget that the entire budget office spent an entire day going through to say, here are all the problems with what you did and why it doesn't work. And it's no fault of yours, but you almost certainly will run into the same problems.
So I understand what you're saying. I'm not suggesting we all get our own spreadsheets and go home and start doing that. I think we know where the big rocks are and the smaller rocks are. But to your point about the salary increases, we are raising salaries. Right now, we're at 4.5 plus the recommended of, was it 3 or 3.5? We're not.
No, it is 4.5.
4.5. So it is 4.5.
I was just saying, if we don't do salary increases.
Okay. Well, I would not suggest not doing that, but the magnitude is what's in question.
And there are additional salary increases that have been authorized, in this list for those other agencies above the 4.
The
State's attorney, the sheriff, the courts, and the public library, and the community college.
Deb, could you bring up the list of, I'm sorry, Commissioner, were you?
No, again, I think that's our challenge. We may not all agree, and you need three votes to pass a budget.
Could you bring up the list of the one-time funding, for example, the parking garage, PFAS, the Piney Run Dam, that sheet?
The uses?
Yeah, that we put the one-time funding in, yep, okay, thank you. So I'm going to offer it out again, that if you really want to avoid raising recordation tax rates this way, and we need four of us to agree to raise the recordation rates, and it does not look like we have that right now. The most straightforward way to do this, without going into the pages and you know, going through elongated discussions about this, we have a couple of things right there that we might be able to pull money out of to plug the gap for this year. You know, I've already stated that I'm sickened to have to consider the raising of any kind of tax rate whatsoever. Even ideology and philosophy aside, it sickens me. Even from a pragmatic stance, it disturbs me. But if you really do want to try to get through this year without raising anything, then I would submit that this is probably going to be the easiest and the most direct way of doing that. Maybe instead of the $9 million for the parking garage, we do 6. You know, maybe we eliminate PFAS altogether because we don't know what that's as a risk, because it's going to cost us something. We don't know what it's going to cost us. But for this present year, we eliminate that completely. That takes us closer to getting us where we need to go. Same thing with the Piney Run Dam, right? I mean, Commissioner Guerin, part of the reason why we cut that, because you had a very knowledgeable explanation that we really didn't need everything that we had there based on construction estimates. You know, we could take a risk and eliminate what we set aside for that completely. You know, we have options to plug the gap, but again, that gets us to next year, and we're faced with even more difficult challenges next year.
A couple things. One,
Yes.
we do have a vote that has been put in place regarding recordation. That is right now done as far as a developed budget. We can change that, but we do have a 4-to-1 vote for an increase to 6.25 from 5.
Question though on that, not to cut you off. Question though, when we started this first meeting, some things were voted on, some things were not, but in that first initial meeting, all the votes were determined not to carry weight.
Right.
So yes, there has been a vote, but the vote is not a
Okay.
standing vote.
Okay.
It's not a functional vote.
You're talking about voting
Okay,
on the
hold
budget
on a
as a
second.
whole.
Just let me, so we've been pushing this forward, having our votes moving forward on how we're allocating the dollars into the budget. We had a vote regarding recordation taxes, and the first vote was a 5-0 vote, and the second vote was a 4-1 vote. They're votes for placeholders. We're not finalizing a budget through these votes. These votes were to put these, you know, dollars, expenditures and revenue in as placeholders. So that's what we've done. So when you say we haven't had something, no, we have. Now, we can change it, of course, and change a different placeholder. We haven't had a vote yet because it was brought up regarding ag preservation. The 1.5 one-time dollars and then 1 million ongoing from FY '25 forward. There was a motion and a second on that, but we have not determined whether that is something that we as a, you know, as a group want to move forward with. So if we want, we can kind of back out to that and either make a decision as a placeholder. Is that what we want as a placeholder at this time? Since we have a motion, we have a second, unless those have changed.
For
For putting 1.5 million one time for FY '24 for ag preservation and 1 million ongoing from FY '25 forward.
Oh, yeah, that's
That was
still,
the
yeah, that vote is
recommended,
still outstanding, isn't
that
it?
was the recommended motion, and you seconded it.
Yep.
And I fully understand that, and I think I agree with it. But we want to take out 3.9 million, so we're adding 1 million. I just went through, and some of the things you mentioned are one-time money, so it doesn't help this 3.9. I went down, if we take everything extra we gave to Carroll Community College, the library, the courts, the sheriff's office, state's attorney's office, and CC Visa, that's a hair over half. Well, that's 2.2. So we still need another 1.7 million.
Okay,
Now, do we really want to take
do we want to address?
everything we
yeah.
gave them back?
Well, my question is, do we want to address ag preservation first?
Oh,
Because
I'm
the
saying
motion
we
is second.
can, but my problem with
I
it
know.
is, if we're trying to cut money,
Right.
so the
That's-
first thing we do is add $1 million.
That's why I was
And
holding
and
off
I'm
on a
all
vote.
for ag pres.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for
But-
coming years, but we're
again,
talking
that's-
about the fifth.
Honestly, that's why I was holding off on a vote on that, because there's a whole lot
No.
more discussion, like you're saying, so.
Yeah,
But,
we can vote.
but I brought up, when, Joe, you mentioned about the taxes, no, there was an actual vote, and that was on a couple work sessions ago. And we can change it, that's no, I mean, I won't say no problem, that's, nothing, this is all placeholders at this point. But, like you said, we're adding expenses with ag pres when we're trying to cut expenses. And I'm all for ag pres and have been from day one. So I'm going on
Yeah.
5 years of this, and I've been pushing ag pres from day one on its importance. And I have no ag pres in my district, but it's the importance of this county. And Charles Carroll, you mentioned, I think was 3.5 was budgeted, not 1.5.
No, it's higher, no, it was originally 1.5, because it was a $1.5 million pole
It
barn.
wasn't. It was capital for 3.5.
Well, let's call a vote on restoring money for future fiscal years to ag pres. Because we motioned and
Okay.
seconded, right? But we haven't, but then we can get back into the discussion about the recordation tax. So I think that is a separate subject
Okay.
that we're on, so.
If that's what you want to do, and that's fine. Any other discussion on that? I just think it's a bit, unfortunately, premature because we have a lot more. But like I said, it's a placeholder. Okay, I got a motion, I got a second. Any other discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. Okay,
So we're back to the recordation tax.
Now,
if that's what
Yes.
you want to address, it's up.
if we want to talk that, can you take 3.9 ongoing revenue out of the budget and let us look at the bottom lines? Because next year's now 7 million before we talk about Blueprint, I think.
Right, it'll be just, I think, just under 7, I think.
Bouncing screen back.
You guys are patient and quiet.
I've noticed that.
Maybe just quiet.
I think they feel sorry for us.
They used to sit back
Just glad they're
there,
not sitting up here.
didn't they? I feel like they were sitting back there last time.
I used to sit over there.
Is that where they were? Okay. I like them there.
One year they were back there.
No, they were back here. Because I remember asking each one of you your degrees or whatever, where you were from. Yeah, but you were back here.
Kind of makes you think they're in charge when they sit up there.
I like it
And
when
maybe
they're
that's
up there.
true, yeah.
We did. Yeah, I did. It's actually reducing our general fund revenue because it goes directly over into capital. That's,
For the out years, that bottom line still has the $1 million in there for so to speak, extra $1 million for the ag pro.
yes. Oh, so do you want me to take that out?
Take what out?
So I put in air quotes the word extra $1 million for ag pro.
But it was voted, so.
Yeah, it was
So it's-
voted.
We'll keep it in.
Oh, was it?
And then-
Yeah, we
yes.
voted for it in.
Sorry.
So this is what it would look like if that million ag pres is back in, and also the recordation, it goes back to $5 per 500.
Okay, so before you do that, well, now, don't touch anything. Just, is that the consensus of the group right now? To putting recordation back to 5 and then working forward from here?
Well, I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about it, let's look at the bottom line, and
Okay,
we can't
okay, that's
get
fine.
rid of it unless we're gonna cut 3.87.
I don't disagree, I just want to make sure we're all.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying I agree
No,
to it.
I'm just saying we're all on the same sheet of music, seeing what we
but-
see in
but-
front of us.
Right.
That's the
Th-
picture.
This is just
If we don't-
collaborative
if we
work
don't
right
do
now.
it.
It's not a collective budget right now, it's just trying to,
So, again,
2 million.
I would humbly submit that if we are interested in bridging the gap this year, we get rid of anything we've set aside for PFAS, we take something out of the parking garage, and that will allow us to hobble on if the decision or the will of the majority of the board is to move ahead without a recordation tax increase. But then again, you look at the bottom line for '25, and this is before additional agency requests, before the sheriff's department, before the courts, before the library, before anything else that Annapolis throws at us, as well as Blueprint.
we've done that in the past where we've used one-time money to paint a better picture across the years. The challenge is really what you're doing is you're masking the situation,
Right.
as opposed to looking at the ongoing dollars. And it's only taken about 3 or 4 2x4s from Ted on my head to figure this out. But not using one-time funds to salami slice. So I really recommend not going in that direction.
Oh, and that was something
looking
I
at
argued
ongoing
against earlier,
dollars.
too.
So-
Yeah.
So the parking garage, is any of that ongoing money, or is there debt service in there? If we cut that, does that save anything from this bottom line?
We had that all as cash, right?
No, we bonded half
Oh,
of it.
that's right, half and half.
Did half and half?
Yeah, so there's,
Bond was,
This one right here.
okay, and of course, if we build a garage, there will be some ongoing costs
Oh, yeah,
associated
yeah.
with it.
But there's none in here.
Yeah, well, for half of the debt service, there is.
Okay.
I mean, for half of the cost is debt service, so
So
yes.
what's that worth?
see that 225, 889?
This line
The
right
blue
here.
line, blue shaded. What number of the row is that?
Row 85.
So nothing this year, nothing next year?
Right, just because we
Yeah.
won't be spending for a while.
The timing of it. So I understand what you're saying, but that doesn't help.
Right.
And, well, there's several of these projects, well, we don't know the cost. Yeah, we've already reduced a couple of them. We could reduce this too, but I don't believe that that's actually going to save us anything. It's just going to look like we're saving until we're not.
But there is ways to cut back on ongoing dollars, like within DPW, because we've done that before. Now, whether we want to do that again is a different story, but we have done that before.
Well, not really. Reduced it for, I think we reduced roads for 3 years.
Right.
So the ongoing cost continued into the
It's-
future.
oh.
We just saved money in the short term.
Okay. Well, that took away that idea.
And that's, that's just one more way of making the
Masking.
short-term work
Right.
without
Yep.
really
Okay.
fixing a problem.
Okay.
So what's the bottom lines again?
Negative 3.8 million.
So,
Yeah.
so every year's bad. I was thinking 26 and 27 were lower than that, but
And
they're
that's
not.
with keeping recordation as is today at 5. That's what that is.
Well, 26 was a small positive at one point. We've just moved
yeah.
away from it now.
About
Yeah, we
300.
put the 3.9 back, it looks okay.
Well, yeah. Out of what's being asked.
Well, I think I don't know whether or not anybody who may be watching this can see the numbers, but I'll read them off because I think it bears mentioning. Fiscal year '24, with that recordation tax increase, we're almost negative 4 million, negative 3.8. Fiscal year '25, we're 6.6. Fiscal year '26, we're negative 4.3. Fiscal year '27, we're negative 9.4. Fiscal year '28, we're negative, well, might as well be negative 15, negative 14.9. And fiscal year '29, we are negative $19.3 million.
And if we went further out, that number is growing.
Right.
So with the
And that's without
recordation,
Blueprint.
taxes, that we had put in, it would zero balance FY '24, but we would still be in negative 25 forward. Not nearly as significant, but still not in a best place.
26 had a little money on it.
26
but
had a
other-
little bit of money, right.
Wasn't it like
So-
600 or something, I think?
300, but
300,
then
I'm
with the
sorry.
$1 million increase in ag press, it turns negative.
Thank you.
That's right, because we added the Ag Pres into it. So what services, because Tom, you said you had a list. What else you want to talk about?
I didn't say I had a list, I said I had a couple of topics, which
Okay.
we've already talked about, so.
Okay.
Okay. I found some rocks. Some of them are big, some of them are small.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at the Board of Education budget again and consider taking out, reducing it by, reducing the increase by 1 million. Because again, we just don't know what next year is going to bring. We need to keep our options open. If we think it's going to be as bad as it's going to be, I think we can make a sound argument that we need to, again, keep as much available funds for next year as possible. We revisit the increase. I want to give people increases. I'd love to get an increase. I think there's a lot of people in the county that would love increases, but 4.5 seems like a good number. I think 3.5 seems like a good number as well, so we reduce that. And, you know, you mentioned Public Works earlier. I'm going to suggest deferring that Georgetown Boulevard extension at least a year until we have a better idea of what's going on with that development situation back there. I'm not suggesting not to do it,
Oh, I know.
but I think that gives us another $500,000. So I just rattled off a little over $2 million, and I used the term defer. Again, we've got to move some rocks.
Yeah.
I just moved some rocks. I'll probably get some
Yeah.
thrown at me too, but that's okay.
So let me talk directly to this. So the Board of Education, you're saying going from 6.2 to 5.2? Is that-
Yes,
Yeah, so-
5.2 and the
yeah,
additional,
yeah.
and I think it's
That-
important to mention.
That's right, in additional to the
additional
6.7.
funding
That's
for-
correct. So they asked for 6.7 in addition to what is being proposed. And we got to a point to giving them 6.2. Your recommendation is 5.2 from that. And I understand that and don't disagree. It may shock you for me saying that, but I don't. I mean, we got to get it from somewhere.
And that was
The-
my
the-
original
the-
proposal. just
Right,
so
no,
you
I know.
It wouldn't, but,
The fact, the understanding I had with the additional 6.7 was not focusing on Blueprint itself. It was focusing on what is necessary for CCPS to do their job now with positions and other things. So that's why I was like, okay, if that's the case, let's at least get them to where they need to go before Blueprint even takes effect. That was the argument they were making. That's why, you know, every time I would ask, okay, prioritize this list of whatever it was, let's say there's a dozen things, superintendent would say, that is my priority. It's not one above the other. That's the bulk requirement. So I'm all for trying to get CCPS everything they can. But getting to 6.2, I felt was definitely, you know, a goal almost met, and understanding going down to 5.2 may be reality. So that's that. As far as Georgetown Boulevard, is that one-time funds? So it's one-time funds
Yeah.
for Georgetown, so it's not
Yeah.
affecting this. And Georgetown Boulevard, honestly, when I brought Georgetown Boulevard up a few years back, or whenever it was, it had nothing to do with the Beatty property. It had nothing to do with the expansion of that large property, that farm property. It had everything to do with the danger of that curve, to making that into a circle. It would allow for an extension to go into the Beatty property when developed years and years down the road. But we're not, I'm looking for immediate effects of safety. I mean, besides my son totaling his car there, a lot of people have totaled because it's just a very, very dangerous curve. It's a hairpin. So that's why I want a circle there. And because of the through traffic, because people go from 26 to 32 in that direction. So that's why but it was not because of future development, to be honest. And I knew it was one-time funds. Then the third thing you mentioned, just, what was it? I
So
can't see.
I had gone back to salaries, but going back to the Georgetown
salary,
Boulevard issue, and
yeah.
again, not
Yeah.
to have a debate with you, because
Yeah.
I think for people watching, you know, the commissioners, we show deference to districts, you know,
Yeah.
that's Commissioner Rothstein's
Yep,
district.
yep.
I do feel a bit of a closeness to that particular road, because I used to live in Sykesville, so I know exactly what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
But it was in FY '25, that's when some of those funds really hit hard, and that's what
Mm-hmm. I know.
almost in a way, I'm really suggesting is that if we defer it for a year, we're not looking at the really big costs for FY '25, which is almost $2 million. But yeah, I had mentioned the salaries.
Yeah, so that's right.
Salaries
So-
from 4.5 to 3.5.
Yeah.
Again, for people watching, you know, nobody wants any of their stuff cut, but you've heard us ask each other on camera in front of the world, well, what would you cut?
Right.
Well, I guess we should be asking some people the same question. If they're upset about what they're seeing, which I get, you're not going to make everybody happy. And I've already mentioned before, sometimes you get what you need, but you don't always get what you want. You know,
So-
what will be cut? So, but those are my three
Yeah.
rocks, if you will.
Stay away from, I want to stay away from salary right this second, but the other two are important, and it is very difficult with the Board of Education decision, but we may have to go in that direction, and that may be a large chunk that we're going to end up doing. The Georgetown Boulevard, there were decisions made, North Carroll High School, Pantherplex, Charles Carroll Community Center, in different districts for projects. And I was looking at again, quality of life and safety. So Georgetown really had, and Ridenauer had a significant quality of life and safety. And Ridenauer, because there's a lot of elderly coming from Nels Acres and that area that feed right into Liberty, which is very dangerous, and I couldn't convince State Highway to put a light or anything near there. So we're looking at alternative ways to mitigate that. But Georgetown, yeah, it had everything to do with safety. It had not to do with the development and just like you said, for everybody listening, there is no development happening on the Beatty property right now. It is not, as far as I'm aware, under any contract. So,
The Georgetown project is funded with prior year surplus. So if we take this project out, arguably, the funding should come out as well. It's one-time funding for one-time use.
Yeah.
It really wouldn't stay to fund ongoing costs. So that would be a no impact to the bottom line.
right. Yeah, I would ask to keep that in. The Board of Education, I mean, an argument can be solidly made to bringing it down to 5.2 or somewhere between
I mean,
5.2 and 6.2.
nobody can accuse this board of not paying attention to the Carroll County Public School System. That's all we talk about right now. And we're talking about Blueprint most of the time, which we
But
don't
if we
really know
take a
much
million
about.
out, we probably cause their unions to go to impasse. 83%, 84% of their budget is pay, and we just killed them on negotiations. So,
We've actually asked the Board of Ed, and that's exactly.
Again?
Our quick budget analysts asked the Board of Ed, because they adopted their budget last night, what impact it would have if the board, and that's exactly what they responded, that they would have to go back to negotiations, and it would probably lead, and it could possibly lead to
kill it.
over
For newer commissioners, on the idea of impasse, if we can't get to an agreement, we in a very broad way, they can declare impasse, and this goes to an arbitrator who makes the decision, and they do not have to consider our budget situation. I'm not aware we've ever been there while I've been around. Other counties have been up against it. So who knows if it would happen, but certainly should be in our
It's
minds.
another frustrating piece
So-
that they do their budget outside of the cycle, we do our budget.
Right, so I guess I have a lot to learn. So you're telling me the $1 million we'd take out would be directly affecting salaries? That's what the Board of Education just told us.
Well, I don't think we can definitively say that, but if going back to what Commissioner Kyler was saying, if the school system's position is all those other things are going to happen, then the logical extension of that would be, it would affect the salaries. That's not a choice we're making, though.
No, but that's just the facts. If all their energy costs go up, they pretty much got to pay that bill. But yeah, this extra was mostly salaries.
And it would be the entire $1 million?
Yeah, I think, so.
mean-
Well, or
I mean,
if you
what if-
average out the budget, 800,000 or 900,000 of it, it's,
We have no way to answer
yeah.
your question. I mean, there are things on that list.
Well,
that they
you
would
could lie, but no, I'm kidding.
There are things on that list of what would we do with the money that arguably they could make a
Yeah.
different decision. We don't control those.
We've already been told next year, we've got to come up with money to fund the starting salary of every teacher in the county at $60,000. So that's a pretty big jump, too. So now we're talking about just $1 million in FY '24, but we can talk about millions in FY '25.
Yeah, we
Sort of a rhetorical question, but it's,
we potentially have a very big problem ahead of us, but it isn't our problem yet, because the state has not said, Carroll County, you need to come up with more funding. We're just looking ahead and saying this is a likely outcome.
you're right. I mean, they did say that at one point. I don't know if a lot of us have faith in that or not, but that is the issue. It was a bit of a rhetorical question, because we're just trying to come up with some cuts, and we are providing them with 96% of what they asked for.
I agree. And one of the challenges is how the CCPS and Board of Education does their budget, timing-wise, compared to how we do our budget. It doesn't rely on us doing
Yeah.
our budget. They do their budget, we do our budget, and they make it fit, where we should be doing our budget, and then they
Yeah.
do theirs.
But that's how it's been forever.
And that's, for people listening, that's state law. That's not a decision the school
Right.
system is
Yeah.
making.
I still don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree, but-
you're putting, because if not, we do exactly what you're recommending we could do.
Which is, I mean, that's why we're here.
And I think,
Not easy.
No, but I've been saying this, I apologize.
before
every
we
year.
cut-
It frustrates me.
I think before we cut existing people's raises, which is what we're doing, we need to cut positions we added. I mean, I go through, or ongoing money. The comptroller, financial management system, $350,000 a year. Like I say, are we gonna cut a same percentage from the community college, the library, the sheriff, and state's attorney, and everybody else on that page? It's, again, I'm biased because I was there.
Right.
The school system is one of the biggest things this county funds, and it's an easy target to balance and I've said that before, and I can't be one of those commissioners, so let's just take a couple million off of them and balance the budget. It might be easy, but it's not right.
Well, the financial management system, I think is necessary moving forward with.
What's that?
The financial management system, it'll get us
Oh, oh.
into this century of doing the work.
Oh, I agree.
But my challenge with salaries is, it's difficult. We've provided our sheriff with a large salary increase over the years for all the right reasons. I believe, and I was a part of those decisions. We've put money into salaries, into our workforce for all the right reasons. But if we're at this point and we're not looking at increasing revenue for this, ongoing funds, then salaries are going to be the target. And I don't believe it should be our workforce at this point, because we are really a skeleton of a workforce. I'd like to know where we're not, but right now we are really a skeleton, and we're building positions to get us into a better posture, like fire EMS, with those 2 positions that are critical. So maybe taking a % or a % off of other salaries may be warranted. I don't know.
That's an option across the board, a certain percentage. And I just want to clarify, I am not suggesting cutting the school board's budget. I am
Right,
suggesting
right.
that we increase it by 11.9 million.
Correct.
That's what I am proposing.
Right,
I'm not proposing we take any money from them that they already have.
that's correct.
That's sort of semantics, but it's important.
Yep.
I was under the understanding, and somebody please do correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the, and Kenny, you might know this, the money that was given to the school system was to help pave the way in certain areas for Blueprint. For example, trying to get the salaries up to a level that would be close to achieving what Blueprint was going to require, no?
I don't believe so. That was my big questions all the time, was how is this, in preparation for Blueprint? Are you doing this because of Blueprint? And the answers were always no. We're doing this because of the inadequacies of the
I
schools.
have to walk out a second.
It's basically business as usual, although, some things will help. Like if salaries go up, then you are closer to being to 60,000. But what they're asking for this year is not specifically about implementing.
Yeah, it's not about
Well,
Blueprint.
right, but just getting ready, knowing that it's coming, right? I'm
I mean,
I
it
don't
does
even
seem
think
like,
it's that far.
so it does seem like that was a theme, if not the theme. It was in the mix, but
Right, that they-
I think what you're saying, again, you have the, you've been through a few of these, so you probably had the insight to say, well, maybe
No.
not so fast, but it seemed that way to me in a lot of the
don't-
discussions.
no.
It was, please don't take that the wrong way.
No,
Commissioner. I'm not trying to-
but what I saw was exactly what you saw. There was no early on, the presentation that they provided us in the joint meeting that was here was the first time I saw that slide deck. And they said, here are the things that we must fund, and this is why we're asking for $6.7 million in addition to what we are, in addition to the original 6.7. And I was specific, saying, is this Blueprint related? And the answers were always no. And then the second question was, okay, what's the priority of this PowerPoint slide? And their answer was, this is the priority. There is no rank order. It was like a 1 through 12, but they were all the high priority. That was like their number one priority in a slide. And I've asked the same question multiple times.
Of course, on priorities, if they don't get all the money, then something will have to be a
It will,
priority.
of
But
course.
that's where we're saying, we think they're saying they would fund all those other things, and they would make up the difference
Right.
in salary negotiations.
But it wasn't a preparation for Blueprint. It was, they said, hey, we lost 300 and some odd positions. We don't have a special education, requirements. We don't have certain counselors that need to be put in place. I don't remember the entire list, but
I happen to be looking at it.
it wasn't Blueprint directed. And what is Blueprint directed, which we can't answer right now, is what next year is going to look like legislatively if they allow us to use money that is put into compensatory education. If that opens up, then we're good. We're better, in a better place. Right now, it's not. So,
Roberta, you,
Well, I just, the list from the Board of Education is inflationary impacts of a variety of kinds, utilities, insurance, other things. Some blueprint requirements like dual enrollment and AP, career counseling, pre-K full day, transportation and bus contractors, substitute teacher rates, some additional staffing, and then employee compensation negotiations. And
So what was the
mandates.
blueprint piece? Because I
There are
honestly missed
two
it.
specifically identified. The blueprint requirements go to some employee
Okay.
compensation,
I stand corrected. Okay.
and also go to dual enrollment, which is.
Oh, that's the community
yeah,
college.
is big. AP, career counseling, and full pre-K full day.
That's right.
This is
Community
not
college.
the heavy lift, though. I mean,
No, no.
this touches Blueprint. And, you know,
This is the
on
first step.
pre-K, just reminded me, somebody at the hearing said, let the private sector take care of pre-K. Current legislation actually has half of that going to the private sector. The problem is the private sector doesn't appear to be picking it up.
Right.
And so it's not that we're not
Right,
looking that way. The state actually did.
yeah. And the dual enrollment has to do with the community college and us picking up the bills.
Yes.
Yeah, starting in the fall, I guess.
I think so.
Right now, I
Yeah.
know that
Parents
families
pick it
are
up,
still paying
yeah.
because I've written those checks.
You know. You have
Either way, I'm
personal-
still writing those checks.
That's right.
Even
It's just
next year,
whether-
As a commissioner, either way.
Yeah, yeah, well, you'd know better. So it's a little.
So, okay, so going back to the 6.2 to 5.2, is that a doable action, or would it cause more difficulties for the Board of Education and schools since what they've already accomplished in their budget adoption yesterday?
Well, I think clearly they would say it's going to cause complications.
Well, yeah, okay, but I mean, it would go back to an arbitrator.
No, we don't know that.
We wouldn't know
That
that.
just becomes a possibility. If they have to go back into negotiations and can't get to an agreement, then that becomes possible.
So this is something that they need to be listening to on.
I'm
this,
sure they
you know,
are.
Potential.
Oh, they are. John would be more than happy to come over and talk to you if you needed it.
Well, and then as far as the salary, because I do ask just leaving Georgia, because I don't think Georgetown affects anything. But
I'm sorry, say that again? The what?
I don't feel like Georgetown affects anything.
Well, it was more, again,
I mean,
part of it was my not completely understanding how we're funding those projects, but it really was more the next year.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
just.
I don't want to say
give us a
Mox
little
Nix,
freedom.
or I don't care, but I don't think its effects are there that you're looking for regarding Georgetown. The salary, though, is, and that's significant. And we, you know, if we're willing to look at all those salary increases, again, I think from our workforce, you know, position that we should not go any lower, if not higher, if possible, but there's no appetite right now to go higher, even with bonuses. And I know a lot of folks are out there looking for salary increases. I don't know what we're providing to the other entities as far as percentages. I don't have it in front of me.
The extra money that has
Yeah.
been put in, so, for the state's attorney and the sheriff, et cetera, and you want to go to that, Deb?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we funded half of the state's attorney, the community college, the public, well, more, not the public library, we funded 89%. The courts, half of what they asked for, what they were asking for was a 10% increase in the base. Above what was already built into the plan, and a longevity factor. So instead of 10%, it was 5% and half of the longevity. Does that make sense?
Okay, and Deb didn't quite go there. What was already built in was the 5.5 that you dropped into 4.5. So when you say we funded half of what they asked for, that's on top of what was already in the recommended budget.
So if we took out the 4.5 and left it at 5.5, I mean, they were doing a comparison to our salary increases originally, correct? That 10%. So they were trying to get to that 10%.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we took out the 4.5 and left
Extra,
it,
so to speak.
what's that?
The extra, so to
Yeah.
speak, the extra request.
And again, it's not cuts because we have budgeted in there 5.5%, right?
Well, it's now 4.5%, but yes. It was in the recommended budget for all employees on the commissioner's payroll.
Right.
Which is more than just your employees. That includes the state's
Oh.
attorney, the sheriff,
Well, the sheriff's not
the
covered.
sheriff's different. But it includes the state's attorney, soil conservation, who everybody keeps not mentioning, 6 people in soil conservation, and the courts. In the recommended budget, there was a 5.55 increase, and that goes to, fulfill a couple things that were, came to light as a result of our studies over the last couple years. Then the courts, the sheriff, the state's attorney, and soil conservation, community college, and public libraries all asked for additional salaries.
Of
All
what?
of different percentages, all of which have been funded in some part by the board today.
And they vary a lot. The sheriff already had 4% built in, and what you added, I think, was about 7%. Right?
Sounds pretty close.
For the library, they were looking for, on top of 3%, not specifically for salaries, but 3% built into their budgets, and we added almost another 3. Is that right?
How much total?
Libraries.
Originally, they were asking
For
for.
a 7.5. They originally were asked for 7.5, and now it's gonna be.
89% of it.
Yeah,
Okay, so
they get to
there's-
decide.
There's 3% built in for everything they do, so whatever,
The library.
yes. And they asked for another 7.5 on top of that. They got, I don't know what it worked out to, but say 7%. It would seem likely that that would largely go to salaries. But it's another one of those places where we don't control those numbers, so we
Right.
can't tell you exactly what they are. The community college, we had built in 3%, and they asked for another $500,000,
$250.
$250,000. And that was that all included?
No, half of that. It would have been
Half of
one,
that.
yeah, it would have been 1%, and we included a half.
Okay, so, there's lots of stuff happening here, and it's happening in all kind of different ways.
But there were base increases for all those organizations, and then there have been now additional increases for every organization with the exception of commissioner employees.
Because the rationale for those other organizations is that the commissioner employees received it in September. That's their argument they're making.
At least partly.
What's that?
Yeah, at least partly.
I know when we hit these moments where everything gets silent, the temptation is to say, let's stop and come back again.
Well, I
because that-
apologize, I had an emergency personal. So what's the bottom line now?
We're balanced. Nothing.
You don't want to know.
Well, this includes some, I mean, do you want me to take this out or keep it in?
What's that?
Reduction to the Board of Education, another percent. This is Commissioner Garen's suggestions.
Oh, with the Board of Education piece.
Yes.
I don't think-
Reductions.
I don't think
I don't
that's,
think we should punish our employees and their employees when we're adding positions and adding other things. That's wrong.
I think we're going to be in a, not a good position if we do that at this time as well. I don't think we're going to be in a good position if they've already gone through their proposed budget, their,
Yeah.
approved budget, because it's going to cause, I didn't realize that that's already been done. And the last thing we need to do is get them to go back to the table and potentially to arbitration. It's coming down to this, in my view, that a choice is going to be, looks like it's going to be made whether we adjust the revenue as we discussed early on, allowing all of the expenses that we have put in place, or take away that revenue and look at the salaries, because really that's where the crux of the dollars are, of all of the folks and get them down to that 4.5%, or, that's been put in place. And anything above and beyond, either take that away, or I know there's a reluctance on bonuses, but in all honesty, if a dollar comes in somebody's pocket, whether it's via a salary increase or just a separate check, they're happy to get that dollar. And it may just provide something moving forward, knowing that there's that care for them, and their importance. I mean, that's what these type of bonuses can do, and we have the fortune and the luxury of doing that with one-time money. So that's something, to consider. I know there's a reluctance, but there's also a reluctance on the taxes. So,
So I understand your point. I would prefer to try to diversify some of these reductions, if you will. The intention isn't to punish anybody. I think that
Right.
word was mentioned. Nobody's being punished. Everybody's getting an increase. Everybody's budget's getting
Right.
an increase. Everybody's salary's getting an increase. We're adding positions, so I think that's an important point. I'll keep on making it, that we're not cutting we're not cutting a single thing
Right.
out of this budget. As far as I can tell, there might have been something in there, but everybody's getting more.
yeah, and there's a few billets and a few systems like the FMS that are,
Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
for the right reasons. But again, if we look at, okay, we're making a determination, and it's going in that direction, that this is not the year to increase a tax if on the horizon there's going to be a significant reason to increase taxes. So why not do it once and not twice? There's also a reluctance on bonuses to put on the Band-Aids of some of these salaries, but I'll tell you, if we don't do the recordation, we put the bonuses in place, again, where if we increase the salaries, we would have to increase recordation. We would have to increase, we would have to. If we did that, are the servants of the county really thinking through, hey, I'm getting a salary increase because it's on the backs of the taxpayers' increase? And if we can give them the same level of appreciation through a bonus, not being put on the backs of the increase of taxpayers, then I think that's legitimate. It's a way of doing it. I think we have the funds to do it for one time. And I know it doesn't sit well with bonuses, but it also sits less with recordation or with taxes. So,
And I think, and I understand what
kinda-
you're saying, everybody's getting something, they're getting less than inflation, so, that's,
who knows what inflation is now? 8 point something%?
yeah, they were starting at less than inflation, but we've now cut it to well under inflation, and, if I've got to balance $500 on a $400,000 house versus putting it on the backs of all the employees of ours in the school system,
Right.
it's a no-brainer for me.
Where do we have the school system right now? Was that million still out, or is that back in? Where is that?
It's back in, I think.
It is back in?
6.2.
Okay, good. I just was
Where
making
is
sure.
it?
6.2. We're back to 6.2.
We're back to
Oh,
6.2,
you
good.
put it back?
Yeah, okay, good.
Sorry.
I don't really want to personally mess with their negotiations. We did what we did in good faith. They adopted their budget in good faith, so I'd like to definitely keep us at that. I know that doesn't make it easy, but I'd rather keep it at that because that's just people sticking by their word.
Well, I will, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so what are the thoughts about, my idea with the bonuses, leaving recordation off the table?
What do the numbers look like? Can we look at them?
Yeah, this is what it would be, including the sheriff's office. It does not include the 80,000 per diem or stipend for the health department. Would you like to have that included in this reduction?
As one-time costs?
No, that's an ongoing. It's right here, the 80,000. Wait, let me go back to the proposed. So here, I highlighted in yellow everything that would be, everything that was included in the proposed budget that was an additional salary increase.
Above the recommended.
Yes, above the recommended. So it's the community college, the library, the courts, state's attorney, soil conservation, and then down here is the sheriff. What I have this color here is, do you want this included in the reduction for the health department?
It is pay, it is pay, basically, but it's a stipend rather than, increasing the base.
Yes, you could.
It's going to be every year, though.
It's ongoing money. So it'd be plug in the hole kind of thing.
Well, gentlemen, I'm sorry, Roberta, were you?
If I could just.
Yeah, I apologize.
One thing to think about is the public library has indicated that if they don't get at least $120,000 extra, then they won't be able to make that minimum wage that's now been pushed up by the state. So that would put them in a bind if you took the whole 641 away.
So, gentlemen, I will take the point of defending the budget that we had established when we walked in here, outside of the adjustment that we made to AgPres. I've stated my position unequivocally and repeatedly about, my dislike of having to raise any kind of tax at all. This was, we arrived at the point that we arrived at through very careful discussion, through very careful consideration. For example, the increases to the courts, right? I mean, we're hoping at some point in the future we're going to be able to implement a veterans court. But we can't do that if our court employees are not properly compensated for the work that's being done. The positions that we've added, for example, in various departments for the state's attorney, that comes from video evidence review. These are things that are going to be necessitated by the state in coming years. With the Board of Education, as we had talked about earlier, some of that stuff is to help, anticipate the full implementation of Blueprint in coming years. We look at, yes, we can quibble over semantics about, well, we cut it or we decreased it or whatever the case is, but, we did we did make cuts to the projected budget. We did make cuts to a projected budget. It may not be an actual cut, but given where we're going, the trajectory, we did alter the trajectory. you know, the decision to raise the recordation tax was a last-ditch effort to get us through that 3.9 that was outstanding. Nobody liked it, nobody wanted it, but it was a necessary step. And I take the argument that I made previously that you know, even at that rate where we're looking at, you know, negative tens of millions of dollars over time without adding into things blueprint, you know, I hate, I'm going to be pragmatic and I'm going to be as rational as possible. If we are looking at this purely as a mathematical operation, you know, a small but staggered increase in the recordation tax between this year and next year, or even taking next year off the table for that matter, fiscal year 25, but to get us through where we need to be this year with that 3.9. You know, I do not like the idea of having to raise any kind of tax at all. And I certainly understand the passion and the arguments that the realtors gave us the other night. And I certainly understand that, you know, you can make an argument, well, if you take 5% out of every department, but every department gets affected differently. And I think where we are right now is no matter how we try to work this out, where we're trying to make that last-ditch effort to save having to raise the recordation rate, and I appreciate the discussion, I respect the discussion, right? But we just keep coming back around to the same point. It's almost like we started out at the beginning of today, of this afternoon, that you know, the recordation rate was raised not out of a desire to do so, out of a necessity to do so. You know, I think somebody brought up the point earlier that you know, one of the many reasons why people move to this county are the services that we provide. But if we have a growing population, and we're already down approximately 100 people that were, you know, positions that have been cut in the past. You know, we raised the tipping fee we're looking at raising the tipping fee at the landfill to accommodate an extra position to service people who are using the landfill. You know, we are, I think, and I will, you know, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think that this is a measured and modest way of approaching a burgeoning problem. I may have used different language a couple weeks ago, but you know, in my mind anyways, I feel like we've come back to the same place effectively that we started out this afternoon session with. You know, and I appreciate the effort to try to stave off a recordation tax, but if we end up in a situation again next year where it's double what we would potentially have this year, what are we going to do? Raise property tax rates, raise income tax rates next? That in my mind was the ultimate reason that we raised the recordation rate with this budget, was to avoid hitting people in their daily lives with property tax rates and income tax rates. You know, again, it sickens me to have to raise any of those rates, but it's the least evil of the three. And so again, I would humbly suggest that we are effectively where we started at this afternoon. And again, I appreciate and I applaud the discussion. It's good that we had the discussion. But I think at this point, we really are going in a circle now.
So, first of all, I mean, the county's really not growing that much. I mean, from census data, it really isn't. And there's not a whole lot, like Tom said, you know, a lot of inventory that's out there. There's some growth areas that are happening within the county. But I want to get down to what you just kind of said in a nutshell. Like, so besides going in a circle, I mean, are you now saying you want to start back to where we were by keeping recordation in place?
Correct, at the 625.
Okay. And you want to keep everything in place?
Everything the way it was, including our vote to add the 1 million going forward with Ag Pres in future years.
And I tend to agree. The Ag Pres, adding that future years, I'm fine with that, because I think one way or the other, we were going to make it whole each year. Now, I think the better way to do that would be with the one-time money. We seem to have a surplus every year and do that, whether they're ongoing. But I can see what you're saying about the trust issue. But again, I've always been in employee-heavy and equipment-heavy industries. But I can't see trying to balance a budget on the backs of all the current employees. I just don't see that. And like I say, the 5.55 to 4.55 to me hurt because of inflation and what's going on and what people are paying for stuff. But I felt like we had to do that to be prudent, because we don't want to raise anything any more than we have to. But I just feel like cutting them down even further, cutting the other groups down, I just don't feel it's the right time to do that. And I understand the passion we saw at the public hearing. I don't agree with the logic, but I understand the passion. And again, I feel like if we want to do something for Carroll County and housing, we need to up the inventory and fix density and try to make some stuff affordable. Now, again, back to the inflation, the fact that interest is so much higher on a mortgage right now, the $400 and $500 million houses are still going to sell, but anybody that was pre-qualified at 250, that dropped to about 170, and there's no way they can find a house for that. So, I understand that side of the fence wants everything they can have, but again, $500 for each side, the buyer and the seller, to sell a house. If I can't, and I hate raising it, and I've been told by a lot of friends how wrong I am, but you don't not do that and throw it on the backs of current employees.
Okay. So you want to basically say the same as is,
And ag pres, I'll go either.
and
you know,
ag pres,
it's
but
fine with-
maintaining the salary at 4.5%, that's what you're saying.
Everything the way we had it, and
Everything the way we had it.
And I came in here with a wish for a bonus, but if that goes away, I fully understand that,
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, we're 130 minutes in, and we said we were going to take as long as we need to take. So we've walked around in circles, but I still think there's more work to be done. I don't disagree with you about wanting to take care of our employees. I don't think anybody's going to tell us, or any of us are going to say we don't want to take care of our employees. I just think that we need to spend a little more time to look at this. We have the time, and I think we need to use it.
Okay. What part you want to look at?
I mean, we can start wherever you want, but I mean, my bottom line is I'm not ready to finalize this, and at this point, I'm not going to support recordation when it comes to the budget.
Okay.
So you've got one vote out already.
But I mean, is there a specific area you want to focus on?
I'm looking at the whole budget, Ed. I'm not being smart when I say that. We're going in circles here. I know that. We've pulled some things. We've thrown it back in. My whole thing is, and I know Ted's not going to like it, do we take a fresh break? Do we come back in 20 minutes? Do we wait till Tuesday? I mean, I don't care how we do it, but
For a break over.
Yeah,
over
no,
stopping.
I got you, Ted, hold on.
But
But,
if we're truly going to vote against raising recordation taxes, then we need to take stuff out. Again, and I respect your position, but you walked in this room and added $1 million a year, but want to not raise taxes. Well, and.
Well, my
and
point of the
like I
million-
say, I'd rather see, let's cut some of the stuff we added that's new. I can handle that.
Okay.
But-
what do you want to cut?
But would not get employees down to a raise that's not respectable.
Where do you want to start, Ken? Where do you want to start?
My opinion.
On the
we
new
need
pieces, where do you
need
want
to
to
start where unless we pass something different, we need to start where we walked in this
yeah,
room.
he's
and
saying,
keep
start
looking
where
at
we
it.
were, so is he.
Yeah, and like I
You're
say,
saying
the
there's
ag
areas, I
pres,
just want to know what areas that we can start diving.
Well, but he had just mentioned the fact of things we added. So, I mean, we added a bunch of things the other couple of weeks. I mean,
Okay.
what in those areas would you cut?
Gentlemen, I would humbly suggest we wrap up for the day.
No.
There's obviously I would argue that there's more discussion to come. Commissioner Gordon wants to continue on. He needs some time to look over whatever it is he wants to talk about. Commissioner Kyler is talking about, maybe cutting some of these positions. And I think coming back on Tuesday or tomorrow, whenever.
Give me just one.
Oh, sure,
second.
sure.
Do you have any Comments you want to make?
Well, as far as the ag, I don't particularly agree with what Commissioner Bigliotti said, but he's probably right. Does that make any sense? So I don't, I will be,
That's why this group works together.
Yes, we do. Yes,
and we, I agree, you're right, we do work together. Like, I will be, maybe I'm naive, I will be disappointed if we can't come up with 0.75% of this budget to cut. 0.75, that is, not, it's less than 1%, but I'm not comfortable with the recordation tax either. Ironically, I agree with you and Commissioner Gordon. I didn't quite buy some of the arguments, and unbeknownst to a lot of folks, I walked out and told them that right after our budget hearing, and I think they seemed to actually appreciate it. I think I just wanted a T-shirt, and I never got one. So, but I didn't really agree with their comments. But at the same time, I'm opposed to the recordation tax at the same time, for other reasons, for just basic reasons of taxation. I think we could probably agree to stay here all night, but I'm not sure it's going to help.
So why don't we, I'll tell you, my opinion may be looking at splitting the baby a little bit. And it could be potentially looking at recordation in a much smaller increment than from 5 to 6.25. And it could be a 5 to 5.5 or something. You know, there may be something there that can give us something. Because those asks above and beyond the requested budget and those asks that we have put in place and have discarded to this point, I believe are very legitimate. You know, the 6.7 additional from the Board of Education, from the CCPS, I thought was very legitimate. We got to 6.2. The asks for FMS, for the positions for fire EMS, absolutely, I felt like were legitimate. The raises. So maybe we can get there by not going overboard with a 5 to 6.25, because that did not get a unanimous approach. And although we may not get a unanimous approach on anything, it may come closer if we say, okay, we're going to inch to this from a 5 to a 5.5 and find out what that is. But I know it gets laborious, and I know it feels like you go in circles. The one thing I have learned over the years is sometimes just fight through it a little bit, take a breather, and you know, and keep going just for a little bit more. So I recommend we take a 10-minute break, stretch, and then go for another 30, 40 minutes. That'll be it, okay? So we have pretty much like a hard stop around 4:15. Is that?
And that's up to everybody else. I don't care whether we stay here, we come back Tuesday or whatever, but one more point. Right or wrong, we've said it 100 times, the budget isn't final. But the world saw it through the TED show, the public comments, everybody's looked at it, we had it balancing, and I think we've got to be very cautious that we make sure anything we change now, we change with very good reason, not just to get to a bottom line.
I agree.
It's hard.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just before we break,
And that's why I liked your ag pres hit me, and, you know.
those that are listening to this, those that came out on Tuesday evening, if your thoughts and comments don't matter and we're just going to rubber stamp what we've already put into a recommended budget, this is showing you that it's not that way. You know, we are taking every comment and every thought as candid as we can and working through it.
Right.
Because this is not our budget, it's our county's budget. And so we owe it to them. May not get, like you said, everything you want, but, okay, why don't we take a recess till 3:30? Will that work? I need
Motion?
a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we left off after a 15-minute recess. We are charged and ready to go. One thought I did bring up prior to recess is we're bouncing around the discussion on recordation taxes. And going from 5 to 6.25, I think is getting to a point where it's too hard of a pill to swallow at this point. If it went from 5 to 5.5 or 5.75, what is the magical numbers that would appear? And
As Deb is doing that, a process thought, if we are not going to finish today, I think we need to leave here with some idea of what is it that's going to happen between now and Tuesday that's going to put us into a different conversation than the one we're having
Right.
today. Because if we just come back, we're going to be doing the same thing again, I think.
Right.
yeah, so,
Excuse me.
5?
is what, I'm sorry.
That's what 5.5 would do. Wait,
It's not growing.
well, we have it flat.
Okay, yes, you're right,
We have it dropping and then flat.
right.
But let me just see. I don't have this right, because right now are showing the recordation actually remaining at 6.25, so I have to do something different here.
Yeah, so we have to take away that back to,
So I have to subtract.
and I guess as we're going through that, I mean, what's the feasibility from us on that? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, we're going to have to make up the revenue, so
You leave the 6.25 there and subtract the difference.
depending on, I guess, on how much, my suggestion would be to pull it out of the parking garage that we're projecting, the 9 million that we're projecting for the parking garage, plug the hole this year, and we'll move on to next year.
And keeping it like a 5.5 is what you're saying? Okay.
Right?
What are your thoughts?
That's right.
Well, we all know in a perfect world we'd like to do all of it, which it's not. I could go along with the parking garage, but I really would like to see if we could leave recordation alone at least for a year. I mean, I know we've got challenges across the board, but I really do not want to do this year.
So we could take it all out of the parking garage, plug the gap this year.
I don't think that gets us where we need to be, though, does it?
Well, if we're negative 3.9 and we take 3.9 out of the parking garage,
But that's, again, it's not, we're kind of masking an issue.
right, I understand. But yeah, if we are trying to work through this year and we are trying to reach a consensus, we do understand, I think all of us, that because I would imagine we all understand, and I don't want to assume, but that, something is going to have to give way in the coming fiscal year, and that's why we are going to be meeting in July, or I would imagine we're going to begin meeting over the summer to deal with this. If plugging the gap gets us through this year without the recordation tax increase,
Sure.
and that's how we move from point A to point B, which gets us through the rest of the alphabetical point constellation. And if that's what gets everybody on this board comfortable with supporting the budget as it is, because again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this stuff, the positions for the state's attorney with that video evidence review, that kind of stuff, I mean, this is not, these are not choices that we're summoning out of the ether to implement. There's all a tangible reason for the existence of these things and why we made the reasoned choice, the rational choice, to add these into the budget. And so if the difficulty is moving beyond the recordation tax for this year, then logically it seems to me we have to pull that out of one of the larger projects that we've put one-time funding into to bridge the gap between this year and FY '25. Now, I will go on the record and say that while I can accept doing that, I'm not comfortable doing that. I will, if it's the majority of this board decides that that's the way to go, I will go along with it because I really do want to try to find a budget that we can all agree to at least this first year.
So what's the difference between doing something like that, which I understand, but it's still masking an issue, than providing bonuses to those that we believe are, warranted the additional increase?
Well, and I take the point, but I will reiterate the argument that I made a little earlier that we give employees the bonus, not that they don't deserve, salaries they're making, but if we give them a bonus this year, that makes it incumbent on us to try to do something next year as well.
We're going to be doing the exact same thing by masking it with one-time funds to zero a balance this year. We are going to be in a very difficult situation that's not going to lower the budget or lower the difference in that budget. So my recommendation, and it's just one of amongst us, is that we look at how to fix or establish this budget using ongoing funds the best we can. That, to me, legitimizes the budget, not by masking it. And I understand, the tax situation. If we're going to do it, do we do it once? Do we do it twice, if necessary? Are we willing to do it because of the expenses that are put in front of us? I get that. That's why I'm making a suggestion of, instead of hitting it with that entire 1.25, hit it with a third of that, or 50-cent increase.
And Commissioner Ralston, again, I know I've said this 1,000 times, I just don't like tax increases, right? But I also understand that there's a reality here. And like I said a couple minutes ago, I would be far more comfortable doing a measured and modest increase to get us into the next year. But if it means having all of us on board for the budget this year, then I can stomach plugging the budget to get us through to next year. Because next year there is going to be no avoiding that we're going to have tremendous costs that this year, next year's going to pale in comparison, or this year's going to pale in comparison to next year. But if we can all be united on this, moving forward with the current budget, doing our best to be as fiscally prudent as possible, and yes, we are plugging a gap to get us through this year. But next year, all bets are off.
So I appreciate your comments. I, too, am against the recordation tax. I think we all agree that masking's bad, but in my mind, masking would be looking at a deficit and just taking one-time funds to make it look like we balanced it. I think you're talking about the parking garage, though, so as far as I'm concerned, I think there's some healthy ambiguity there with what you do with those funds. If we do that, we abandon the notion of the recordation tax. We do that, and I think Commissioner Rothstein mentioned earlier, you just take a look at possibly, you didn't use the term shaving some things off, but just slightly reducing things across the board in certain areas. Maybe that gets us where we need to be. I don't think I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you were talking about looking across.
Okay.
So are we willing to go back to where we were when we came in on paper? And we're saying we want all of them to find 3.9 million that can come out of the ongoing money. Is that what we want them to look at between now and next meeting?
I don't
No.
believe we can do
No.
that. You
That's our
would
job.
run into policy decisions. There's no
Yeah.
way
Oh,
around it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's us.
Yeah, well, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah,
No, I think what
that's-
Well,
the
my-
suggestion is to use one-time money to put $3.9 million on the bottom line and balance 24.
That's
Is the
what's being
simple
discussed
Correct.
amongst
way of saying it.
Joe. But-
Well, I don't know. I hope I wasn't. I
No,
would,
that
I in no way
that was
want
his
to.
comment.
Well, you mean Commissioner Vigliotti?
Yeah.
I didn't interpret it that way, but to your point, Commissioner Kyler, I think what you're asking for might make sense. I mean,
But,
Just
yeah, I don't, I'm not comfortable taking out of employees' pay. I'm not, somehow we need 3.9. I think we were at a good place, maybe with the exception of cutting Ag Press. I was never comfortable about that, but I think that's fixable. But I don't know, I don't see a whole lot that I want to cut out of here. But if we do, like I say, my opinion, it would be new positions and not punishing the current employees, but that's me.
we have 5 very diverse opinions on how to get this done. Maybe that's a good thing.
And I think Commissioner Rossian had mentioned this a couple weeks ago, right? That, you know, not one of us is going to be 100% satisfied with the budget, but it's getting it to a place where, you know, we were, as Commissioner Gordon mentioned earlier, we were elected to these positions to make the best decisions possible that we could. And if getting us through this year, again, is taking 3.9 out of the parking garage, if that gets us all on the same page, at least as far as that is concerned, taking that 3.9 out of the parking garage and putting the recordation tax back at $5 gets us through FY '24, then I can deal with that.
But I understand, but if you look at that budget, and then you look at what 25, 26, 27, they are very large
Yes.
challenges that we're being confronted with. And we should not look, I believe, at just walking into FY '24. By law, that's what we have to do
What's the bottom line
to get
again?
there, but,
Well, that's the reduced.
Oh.
yeah, take
So
that
it's-
out.
That's what it is if you keep the recordation.
If you keep it.
Yes.
Yeah,
So if you take
so
it
he's
out.
saying
It's
take it out.
$3.8 million.
Oh, minus 3.9.
Yeah, 3.8 and change.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, as I mentioned a little while before we went on break, right? I feel that we achieved the best possible budget that we could have, but if it means bringing on 2 more of us to agree to the budget, I'm willing to alter how we're bringing income into this year's budget.
But this doesn't balance the budget.
No,
It-
no, I was gonna say,
you-
changing the parking garage we can't change it enough to make this 0.
I mean,
Isn't there,
And if we can.
there's 9 million in, right?
Well, if you're willing to settle for a one-time fix, yes, because there's
Yeah.
9 million of cash.
so you could.
I'm not advocating that, but
No,
Yeah.
that's where
because-
part of the conversation has
Right.
been.
Because FY '25, '26, everything is way out of balance. And then we're gonna be, in a worse situation next year. So the best thing we can do is work hard to get '24, '25, '26, and as far as we can, closer to zeros,
Well,
without using one-time funds.
well, if we're taking, if we're putting back the revenue we allocated to the parking garage, and you still have half of the parking garage as bond money,
Yes.
and we don't know what the parking garage is gonna cost,
No.
and then that makes this year okay, but next year's still ugly.
And we will have to find the money that we didn't put on the parking garage.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
My
yeah,
guess is, we're going to end up spending more than 18 million, not less than 18
yes,
million.
yes. And,
That's a fair point.
but I don't particularly want to give up anything that we've said we wanted to spend money on. And at least two of you don't want to, you don't care if recordation tax goes up a quarter. You don't want it to change, period. So maybe this is the only viable option, and you just gotta make sure you save as much money next year as you did this year, and we have surplus, and we'll use it for the garage.
I mean, we're putting lipstick on a pig.
What did you say? Never do a budget based on hope, and here I am.
That's right. But we really are, it's lipstick on a pig. We're masking
Yep,
a situation that is not in balance. And it's been done before this way,
oh, I'm sure.
and it comes out the same way. It's not imbalanced. You know, and the hard decision to do is either cutting services that we've said, again, going back to Commissioner Guerin, it's not cutting services that are in place, it's cutting those services that are being requested of us for additional funding or service and product, or it's increasing any level of revenue. And we got to a point where we raised revenue significantly in recordation. If that's not the right method or equation to use, then why not look at raising recordation in a much smaller amount to 50 cents? I understand that nobody likes the word increased taxes. So even if it's a penny, but we've got to get somewhere where we add revenue to meet the demands and the services that are being put in front of us, or we take those services away. Doing it this way just masks the problem. So, and that, it's
As
just
we
not good.
look ahead, we've talked at times about the future years. I'll make sure we bring together two things we've been talking about more or less separately. Whatever's on that bottom line is a problem that's going to need to be fixed. And whatever's going to come to us through Blueprint and increased costs for fire EMS beyond what we have captured so far is then on top of that. And if the picture is what it seems like it's looking to us, we will be faced with a choice between tax increases or service cuts. And that's not reductions and increases in services. We will have to look at reducing services. There are only choices. And playing around with $1 million here, $1 million there is not what we're going to be facing. And that says nothing about what we're doing right now. I just
Yep.
don't want to lose
No,
that.
no.
Okay. What are some additional thoughts?
Well, gentlemen, how do you feel about the parking garage idea? If it avoids the recordation tax increase for this year?
Well, so it sounds like the parking garage is a foregone conclusion, although we don't have the study yet, right? But consensus seems to be that we're going to need it. Okay, so what's worse? Masking a potential deficit using surplus or raising taxes to spend more money? I think the latter is much worse. That's just my personal view. That's just Mike's view, Commissioner Guerin's view. So if we're talking about using surplus to try to accomplish some things, I'm much more in favor of that. Again, I mean, I think we're having a good discussion here. We've done a lot. This budget accomplishes a lot of things that we probably aren't going to be able to do next year. My hope was that we could, come to some reductions.
And I think you make a good point, and that leads me to, again, and I know I've probably said parking garage and parking study more than anybody in the group, but maybe when we're earlier than this next year, we need to say, do we want to give raises or do we want to build a parking garage? Do we want to park at Ascension Church? Do we want to look for surface parking for everyone and not do the garage, maybe it's something we can't afford. So maybe you're predicting the future here.
But, which I don't disagree, the parking garage problem set in this complex, I mean, it's not new news. They've been working this for
Oh,
quite
I
some
know.
time, as far as trying to purchase properties and getting to a point with what they want to accomplish in the complex, and what the needs are. So, I mean, it's not like an overnight,
Oh,
build a parking garage. It's been years in conversation, concept, to a point now where it's, okay, how do we move forward where it dovetails with the complex growth itself? So, nobody that's going to be achieving or becoming appreciative of all these gains, okay, is going to be upset that we're masking this. Nobody.
oh, I know.
Nobody in the county, for the most part, is going to be very upset because their taxes are not going to increase, and they're going to feel comfortable that all the services that they are getting today, they're going to get tomorrow.
Yeah,
So
oh,
they're
yeah.
not, but, we say, a lot of us, and I am too, fiscally conservative and conscious of how we're spending our dollars. My concern is that it's going to be, like we said, those herd of elephants and lots of bears that are, all coming together. If we don't posture ourselves in a way that those out years look cleaner than they do now, it's going to be very, very, very ugly. But like I said, everybody who benefits from this, they're going to be like,
Oh,
hey, this is great, no recordation tax, everybody gets their raises, everybody gets the positions, the systems, everything's going to happen. Nobody, I believe, is going to be upset about this. But that isn't necessarily where we need to be as responsible to establish this budget. That's my
Well,
concern.
what about this, and this is totally backward for fiscal conservatives. You had 9 million in here using cash, not getting a bond. What happens if we take 4.5 million of that and say, fine, we're not taking it out of the budget, we're now gonna bond that amount? Does that do about the same thing?
You add another 150,000 a year in debt service or something like that.
Yeah,
400,000.
yeah.
Yeah, 225 is the first year, so
Oh, okay.
this would, you'd have to multiply all those by 1.5.
So again, that's fixing this year, hurting the next year's. Like I say,
Right.
it's back,
Right.
I always tell people you don't finance something that doesn't appreciate. So, like I say, it's backwards to
Like a
say, let's
boat.
finance everything. But does that, so that really doesn't make it any better than Joe's idea.
Well, like I said, it would make today work. It just
Right.
deepens your problems for the future.
I don't think this is good, but it's the best idea we've had today.
It's going to put it on the backs of us to establish this, which will end up creating a larger revenue requirement next year and for the out years. That is the assumption that should be made by doing it this way. So if, we are owning up to that, it's not a fact, it's an assumption. you know, and you take assumptions as far as you can until you turn them into facts. But the assumption is that because of the situation right now, if this is, you know, where we want to go, the assumption is that it's going to be put back on us to put further on, you know, I won't say the backs of the taxpayers. I mean, that's kind of weird saying, but to find more revenue that our county is going to have to fund. And it'd be nice to say, well, that may not happen or this may happen. Right now, it's a pretty strong assumption that this is happening and it's going to get worse. So, and then we're going to be looking at not just recordation, but other revenue streams on how we're going to be able to do it. So it is. It's either do it now or do it. And this is kind of what, you know, Karen said the other day, you know, in her, you know, leather wood, not leather men. She said, don't tax us now, tax us later, and do it once, not twice. And there's logic to it. You know, and it's not like I'm so much against it. It's just, are we willing to expect that? Are we willing to put that, you know, in front of us and say, this is the assumption that needs to be made, and starting early next year, how this all turns out, because you're right, the state has no clue. They're so confusing every time I read what they're doing. I really don't know what they're doing.
It's a mess right now.
It is, and
Don't watch any of the meetings.
it's weird. I mean,
You don't
it's
get
so.
anything out of them.
And my problem is, they're going to do what's best for Prince George's, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and others. That's going to leave us in a position that we're going to have to fund in a way that we will not have the revenue to fund unless we make the changes. I know I'm going on about this, but that's either tax now and later, or don't tax now, tax later at a higher amount, or cut expenses. And, yeah.
Where are we, and we don't have enough time to discuss it today, EMS and fire, does that need to slow down? Can we keep doing what we're doing with that?
Well,
And
what speed we go at, I would say, is not really relevant to this conversation. Whatever total cost we're going to get to. If you want it to be less, it would be re-examining the model of how we're going to provide it.
So I think that is a discussion we are going to have as a board. We are supposed to meet with the ESAC in June, I think.
Yeah.
They are going to be telling us that we might not make our numbers and that, you know, overtime is going to accomplish a lot of the things we need to accomplish. But I've always told them, and, you know, I think it is completely logical that at some point we as a board take a look at everything. So sure, I think that's a healthy approach. I commend the previous board because things, you know, you got the right people and the right strategy in place,
Yep.
but it will be time to, I think,
But we
relook at
didn't
it.
have blueprint. It was easier because we didn't
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
it was a one target we were going after. It was
Yep.
difficult, you're right.
Yeah.
But now we got that and blueprint. That's what, so I appreciate that, you know, comment, but
But yeah,
it was easier.
yeah.
So-
No, there were hard decisions to make, but it was probably a lot less complicated
Yeah.
by the financial situations. But just to add that note to Commissioner Kyler's comment, yeah, I think it's absolutely our due diligence to take a hard look at everything. But I think they expect that. They know we're going to do that.
Yeah, on everything, because I understand, you know, I'm very conservative, but we've increased the sheriff and safety, we've increased fire protection and EMS, Blueprint's increasing our schools whether we like it or not, and so, in theory, the quality of life in Carroll County and the service we're giving people is improving. And to think no one should ever pay for that is probably naive. Or we need to drop back and say, we really can't do all this. And then, I didn't even mention the landfill. That's not gonna cost a penny or two in the future, you know? It's a lot of issues coming.
And what you just said is our core challenge. We've taken on huge new costs without ever having a conversation about how is this going to work. And that's what you're wrestling
Right.
with.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you summed it up very well. And if the expectations are for people to pay for the services that they're getting, they only do it in a certain way. And that's through three different revenue streams, you know, for the most part. I mean, there's fees and stuff like that for other, but that need to be looked at. And if we're willing to do it now for this fiscal year, then we do it now. If we understand the assumptions that are being put in front of us, that it's going to be a very large amount of money that, you know, will have to be dealt with next fiscal year. And I don't know what that equation looks like, but I'm sure, Ted, you can figure that out with your team in preparing us, what that would look like. Not now, I'm saying for next fiscal year, with what the deficit's going to look like. Or I mean,
And I think,
it's one of two ways of doing it.
it's obvious, unless something wild happens between now and Tuesday, we're not gonna have a 4-to-1 vote to raise any kind of taxes. I just don't see that happening, so maybe this is the best option, and we've got, what we're gonna say is, this was probably the easy year.
So, yeah, so with that said, I mean, just getting the temperatures, there's no willingness on moving recordation at this point,
I don't want to
out of
touch it.
5?
I want
Okay.
to keep it where it is.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, so that's obviously now off the table.
If there's not going to be a tax increase, and not interested in trying to reduce any services, I think we are left with this fill the gap with one-time money,
Right.
and we're probably done. We can figure out what's the best place to change something to fill the hole. These discussions are done, and at some point, we turn our attention to the much bigger problems we're gonna face next year.
And we don't need to vote to say that, we're gonna vote
No,
on the
no, we do.
budget.
We-
We do today?
Yeah.
To
We're-
say, we need to say this
Yeah.
is a policy once you
Yeah,
follow?
yeah, yeah. We need to finish here and then adopt the budget on Tuesday. But, so,
So I guess
Okay.
we need a motion
well,
to,
yeah, just, yeah, I mean, if you want to go there, I was just going to open up for
Well, one
discussion.
question.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Before you make a motion.
Yeah.
So everything is back as it was when we got here, and we've added the ag, and that's gonna stay in, and then we're gonna do your reduction to make it balance. Does that
Pardon?
make sense to everybody?
Yes, those were the actions that were taken.
Right.
That's correct.
That's where we are now.
Yeah, yep, those were the actions that were taken.
so motion
Okay.
to restore the recordation tax to $5 per $500, including keeping ag preservation from fiscal year '25 ongoing, and to direct staff to find the most reasonable, mathematically rational place to take $3.9 million of one-time funding to plug the gap for this year.
Actually, no, you're right, all right.
And then applying 1.5 million one-time ag for FY '24.
Yes.
That's already in.
So,
Oh, okay.
But in the meantime, again, I would encourage at least the thought of some, if it's a slight reduction to some of the increases we've made, you need to look out into the FY '29, you see how they're exponential, how they operate exponentially. I think it is still something that, if after this day, before Tuesday, it's something to consider. I still think it's something to consider. Maybe we're not reducing things by a percentage, but you got to realize that 0.5% over the next 5 years of budgeting, it's a significant amount of money. So, if we can do that, if we can find a way to agree to do that, it can be less than some of the things I've mentioned. There is some benefit down the road.
Just, I apologize, say it one more time.
Okay,
I'm
so
not, I didn't catch it.
I've sat here and I've made some pretty, I don't know how to say bold, maybe, yeah. So I've made some suggestions on reductions. And one of the things I've mentioned, and I think another commissioner has mentioned it, is the salary increases. And I mentioned taking it down to 3.5. That was not agreed to. That was not agreed to by this commission, and I understand that. But even any small reductions, when you look at the budget exponentially through FY '99, you multiply all that by 5. I mean, it is a significant amount of money either way.
You want to make a friendly amendment to reduce salaries from?
Not right now, no, because I think that it's not that simple, because we've got different types of increases to deal with. And again, not penalizing people, not trying to make it harder on people, but we really are budgeting for 4 years when you spend any ongoing recurring money. We all know that, right? So I would just throw that out there in anticipation of Tuesday.
I agree.
Thank you.
Well, that was sort of the question
What?
that Ted asked earlier on. It sounded like the board was coming to agreement that this would be
Yes.
the budget, and then
Yes.
therefore then you wouldn't need a Tuesday. But so you're talking about or a third.
No,
Oh, well-
but your conversation is for further discussion and thoughts moving forward, not this.
Well,
Right.
So what's Tuesday for, if we meet Tuesday? Because we were planning on meeting Tuesday up until, I guess,
Do we need to meet Tuesday or not?
So the original schedule was for no this afternoon and for a Tuesday and Thursday work session next week with adoption the following week, on Thursday the following week. The board last week asked for this afternoon session, and so we have this one, and you've had it, or having it. And technically on the books, there's a Tuesday and a Thursday, but
They'll come off?
The thought was that you may not
Okay.
need them if
Okay.
you reached agreement
Yeah.
on the budget. And it sounded, sounds like maybe Commissioner Garen's not there, but it did sound like that maybe the others were there, that this would be your budget. Just, does that all make sense?
yes. Yes.
So I
But-
guess back to that, are you there or what?
I'm there. I'd rather use that surplus money than have their tax increase. I realize that everything's about choices, and I'm willing to make that choice. If there's room for further discussion about that budget, I was just asking that my fellow commissioners at least consider
Got
that
it.
as an alternative before we vote on this budget. That, again, these ongoing funds, the recurring costs, they're exponential.
So
So-
I think you're saying you're willing to vote now that
Yes.
this is where we want to head right now, but you'd like to see us meet Tuesday and talk about potential cuts? Or do you guys feel like we're done for now and we need to talk about the future?
Well, if there's no interest in doing that, that's why I threw it out there. I think it's something that's important to at least consider, whether we can vote on whether to meet on Tuesday or not. If
Commissioner Garin, if you want to meet on Tuesday to discuss some potential cuts, I have no objection to that, but I think right now the hurdle is just getting past this particular point. But if you want to meet again on Tuesday, I've got no problem with that.
and what's currently scheduled for Thursday again?
So the original schedule was for these work sessions like this to be Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, with adoption the following Thursday. The thought of the board last week when they asked for this session to be added was to maybe adopt next Thursday. But if you, but staff needs about a week to put adoption together, so to speak.
If we want to meet one more time.
So we have Tuesday
You guys
scheduled.
would love to see it be Tuesday, not Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have Tuesday scheduled right now at 1 PM.
Yeah, yeah, I think we owe it to all of them. If we're
Okay.
going to do it, we need to do it
Does that work for
Tuesday.
everybody?
Yeah, it may be
Nobody
a
had-
shorter one, and that's
And we
fine.
need to say Tuesday, we're done.
I still need a second.
Second.
Okay. Can I see the, yeah, that one more time? Okay. Motion is made, a second. Is there any discussion on where we are now with the working budget? Seeing here none, all in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing here none, all,
One question. Are we meeting Tuesday or
Yes,
do we
yes.
need to?
At 1 p.m.
We're meeting
At 1.
Tuesday.
yep.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.